Right, good morning, everybody. We have had a number of apologies this morning, so we are going to start anyway. So we are live now, and I need to do my opening remarks. So welcome to this meeting of the Climate Emergency Advisory Committee. My name is Councillor Katie Dye, and I will be chairing today's meeting. Could I remind everybody that today's meeting is being live streamed on the City Council YouTube channel so that the public can observe the meeting with. Please can I ask members to introduce themselves, and can I remind you to mute your microphone when you have finished speaking? Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Councillor John Tudor, representing Killingbeck and Seacroft Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Peter Carlisle, Carlin Farsley Ward.
Good morning everyone, Councillor Mohammed Shazad, covering the Moortown and Meanwood Ward.
Good morning everyone, Mohammed Rafiq, Chapel Alton Ward, and also Exec Board Member for Climate, Energy, Environment and Green Spaces. Thank you.
Good morning, Councillor Penny Stables, Wetherby Ward.
Morning, Councillor Rick Downs, Otley Eden Ward.
Thank you, everybody. And now, if officers would like to introduce themselves, and we'll go this way this time. Thank you.
Good morning, Polly Kirk, Chief Officer, Climate, Energy and Green Spaces.
Good morning, Toby Russell, Clerk to the Committee.
Good morning everybody, Tony Stringwell, Head of Operations for Green Spaces.
Hi everyone, Emma Trickett, Parks Technical Manager.
Morning, Vicky Baker, B&G Officer.
Thank you, and thank you for taking your time, everybody, to join us today. So I'm going to go over to Toby for the first few items.
Thank you, Chair. So item number 1 is appeals. We have no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Item number 2, exempt information. We have no exempt information on today's agenda, which would exclude the press or the public. Late items is item number 3. So yeah, we have no formal late items today. Item number 4, can I ask members to declare any interests? No, thank you. And item number 5 is apologies for absence. So we have apologies for absence from Councillor Anderson, Councillor Rowntree, Councillor Harrington, Councillor Ray and Councillor Newton. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Toby. And before we move on to the next item, which is the minutes, can I say a huge congratulations to everybody involved in both doing the work and making the submission that led to us being awarded Green Council of the Year recently. So huge congratulations and thank you to everybody involved. I think that's great. So I know, Councillor Rafiq, you were there to receive the prize. I don't know if there's anything you want to say about it.
Yeah, the prize was sponsored by Keep It and Tidy, which is a very well-known organisation nationally. Alison was the CEO of Keep It and Tidy, actually in her opening remarks mentioned the work the council is doing, particularly our district heating network, the fact that 0.2% of our waste goes to landfill, amongst other things, in our fleet as well. So you know, they've actually mentioned the reason why we actually got it and the good work that's going on. However, there's still a long way to go. You know, it doesn't stop here, and there's a lot of challenges and a lot of work to be done. So yeah, but well done to all our colleagues, within different teams who actually made it happen.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, it's really good news. And if anybody hasn't read the press release, then the list of achievements is really quite impressive. There's a long list of the reasons why we were awarded it. So great news all around. So yeah, congratulations. Okay, so item number 6 is the minutes of the previous meeting, and they start on page 5. So I will go through them page by page, and if there's anything anybody wants to add, either as a correction or as a matter of arising, please do so. So first one is page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Page 8. the only thing I would add on that is that one of the actions was for Rachel to share the public health report, which she did, and you should have all got that. Page 9. Page 10. Page 11. And page 12. Okay, so we all happy to agree those as a true record of the last meeting? Thank you very much. Right, the next item is open forum, and we haven't got anybody for open forum, which is always a disappointment. I have been putting feelers out, and Polly and Rachel have been working on it as well. And we do have some people lined up for future sessions, but we haven't got anybody for today. So again, my usual request, if you have community organisations or campaigning organisations, schools, anybody who'd like to come along, please pass that invitation on to them. However, something that we noticed should have been on the agenda and always used to be but wasn't for this one was feedback from the workshops that we've been holding. So we thought we could just do a little bit of brief feedback from the 2 workshops that have happened since the last SEAC meeting. So the first one we held on the 30th of July, and the whole theme really of the workshops for the whole of this year is looking at improving our communications, and it's different from the way we've run it in the past, but the idea is that this is something that we really ought to grapple with, and anything that we can do to move along in that space is worth looking at. So that's the focus for the whole year, and in fact it was quite interesting that I was at a community group meeting earlier this week, and we had a presentation from a guy who was a professor from Leeds Uni working in climate, and he didn't know I was coming, and he didn't know that we're working on this as a workshop, but he prepared a bunch of slides all about generally climate change and the issues that we're all going to have to face, but then finishing with what Leeds is doing. And his final slide was, Leeds is doing some really, really impressive climate work, but you really ought to be shouting about it more. And it kind of made me think really that we were there in a community meeting, and as always, people didn't know about the pipes, didn't know about all the stuff that we're doing. So I think it is a really pertinent topic for us to be looking at for the whole of the year. And if we can make some real progress on it, then I think we will have done some good work. So we started off by looking at terms of reference and setting the tone for all the workshops. And then we moved on to look at the Leeds by Example website, and we looked at examples on the website and talked about things that we thought could improve it. So some of the things that people raised were the idea of making it a bit more personal with case studies, of linking with things that are going on in the city, like the uniform exchange. Somebody suggested an idea of kind of quick climate wins, so things that people can do that are beneficial, but really kind of nice and easy. How can people change things they do at home, the way they travel, things like that. I think, although feel free to join in if you were there and you can think of anything else on that theme that we came up with, but that's kind of the end of my notes on that section. We talked about the climate newsletter as well, and the challenge really of getting that out to more people and making it something that's easy to read, and looked at changing the design of it, looking at the length of it possibly, how we can get more people to sign up, promoting on other social media sites, so sites of our own, but also council sites like Arium, Tropical World, things like that, and looking if we can get people to share stories with us that people might like to read. couple of people also mentioned the potential of a WhatsApp channel and whether that would be a good idea. And Councillor Bromley was interested in helping working on the design of that, so that was useful. And then we moved on to electric vehicles, and we had a really interesting discussion on that. And I'm sure you'll all have heard people's arguments for why EVs are a bad thing and they're destroying our roads and lots of other misinformation. So we looked through a fact sheet that had been prepared that kind of challenged a lot of that information and put out some facts rather than things that absolutely had no basis in any science whatsoever, about the size of them, about the safety and batteries and things. So we had a really good discussion about that. And I can't remember where that was going to go in terms of those facts. I think we had a discussion about countering people who made false claims on social media, if I can remember rightly. And then we finished with a discussion on the work that's going on at Temple News and Cafe in terms of relating food strategy to menus, and we had a look and a discussion on some of the menus that are available and changes that are being made. So I think we've made quite a good start. I don't know if anybody who was there or Polly would like to chip in with anything that's happened since then or anything that I've forgotten.
So one of the agreed actions was that we would do a briefing note in terms of the feedback that we received on the website, which we've done. So just need to circulate that and get everyone's feedback. The other thing at the time, I'd secured one graduate that was going to come and work with us, so not a graduate, a year 3 student, who is going to do 100 hours free work with the council for one of the modules. Since then, I've managed to get 2. So they are both going to work jointly on the Leeds by Example website, and so the briefing note that I share will be almost a work brief that they get to work towards. And there were loads of good suggestions that came back, so I've tried to capture all of that in detail, so I won't go through that now. In terms of the EV questions, we'd already done like a rough draft of questions, so we did a bit of a critique on the day, and the team now are just kind of trying to strengthen those. So we were looking to do research papers. There was some of the research. If you were an anti-EV person, you could say, you know, it's not a neutral enough body. So we were looking to make sure that everything would stand up to challenge. And the idea is we are going to start to do more promotion of new EV projects. So as we do that on social media, we know we will get the standard responses, and it will allow us just to have at least one go at responding. We won't get into this argument and back and forth because it's never productive, but we will at least for one, you know, if somebody says it's going to blow up or explode or catch fire, we can at least for the first time kind of counter it. So that's where we've got to. So there's a lot of work going on in the background, and hopefully by the end of this year we'll be in a much better position than we have been for a little while.
Thank you, Polly. Councillor Stables.
I wasn't there, unfortunately. It sounds like it was a really good workshop. So a question, a couple of questions. In terms of what you've just said, Polly, is it possible to share some of those key? It would be really useful for us to have that information in terms of countering negativity against EVs. So if you could share the information, that would be really good. And the second point was, I just wondered on social media, are we including community environmental events? Are we pushing those out as well? Have we got a way of capturing that from around the city and pushing that out?
At the moment, we're really light on social media on climate specifically, because of a resource gap which we're currently recruiting to. So I think there's an opportunity to do all sorts of things differently once that post is recruited to. So we can pick that up as a suggestion.
Thank you. Councillor Downs.
Apologies, yeah. Picking up on the EV point, somebody that drives one, my wife's got one. I don't have a car. But I see some of the negativity around, and it is so frustrating. I mean, if you look at somewhere like Sweden, where it's really, really taken off, they haven't got the issues that the naysayers are claiming that are the problem. And I think that's an example that we can use to say, look, this is what's happened. But even so, within the UK, we're up to about 20% of cars are fully EV, and another nearly 10% are plug-in. And when you look at that, clearly there is a shifting belief within the population that it is the right way to go. And there was one other point I was going to make about it. I forgot what it was. When you get to my age, sometimes your brain goes. Can I come back in 1 minute about that? Thanks.
You most certainly can, yes. Anybody else want to come in on that workshop? Okay, I'll move on, Councillor Downs, but you're very welcome to just indicate that it's come back into your brain. Okay, so the next workshop we had, I had feedback saying it was the best workshop that they had ever been to, from 2 people, but Councillor Downs has remembered what he was going to say, so before we do that, we'll go back.
Thank you for your indulgence, Chair. I wonder whether part of the issue is, I mean, some people are anti-environment. They don't believe there's climate change. That's one issue. But the other thing that has been raised to me in the past is about the expense of electric cars. That a lot of the electric cars that were coming on the market were like £50,000, and how can the common person afford them, as it were? We're about to see, I think, a flood potentially of cars coming in from China, where there's new technology and they're bringing cars in for about £15,000 that are fully electric. And I just wonder whether that next generation is going to be partly the game changer for the UK, because it will become affordable for many more people. And I just think that's something that we need to be aware of. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and I couldn't agree more. And also, you know, the second-hand market is becoming much more equal as well. And I read something, I think it was from the AA this week, that the number of driving tests being taken in automatic cars has increased significantly, and a lot of young people, when they're asked, have said, well, it's because I only ever have the intention of driving electric vehicles, so why would I want to take a test to allow me to drive a manual petrol vehicle? So I think you're right, and I think it's potentially good news. Okay, right, so the best workshop that has ever been held, ever, in the history of the council was a visit to Lotherton Hall, which was absolutely fantastic. It really was. So huge thank you to everybody involved in putting it on. And we learnt so much. And the keepers there were fabulous. Really, they were. They were hugely knowledgeable, very, very excited, really happy to take us around and show us everything and talk to us. I personally was particularly impressed by the conservation work. I kind of, like a lot of people, had an idea that was becoming a more important part of the role of these places, but I didn't understand the extent to which it played a part, but also the whole kind of global aspect of it in terms of breeding programs, and it was really good. So we had a look round, we had great fun, and the main takeaway from that was that we looked at enclosures where organisations have been persuaded to sponsor an enclosure, and we were asked to think about, is there anywhere in our wards, in other places, where we think that kind of work could be done? So I'm re-asking that, you know, if you've got anywhere in your ward that you think that organisations that are working with us on climate projects in the council might be persuaded to do something similar, then please let us know. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Polly?
So I think part of the challenge we've already mentioned earlier about loads of people don't know about district heating, and we've done so many press releases. We've had a Sky documentary, you know, it's probably the most promoted project we've ever done, but yet still people don't know about it. So the idea of what we've done at Lotherton is that it's just something that's there, lots of people walk past, it's got information about it. And I think in order for us to kind of get into people's psyche and for people to understand the different things we're doing, we need to talk about them. It needs to be very visible around the city. And we've always talked about how we dress the city. So I think one of the things is as well about some of our other events and attractions, are there ways that we can make them more sort of climate focused, or can we sort of make things more visible? So, for example, we're looking at doing a sustainability walk in the city centre that's linked to district heating and potentially could go further, it could link into other climate projects that are happening. But is that something that could be viable in different communities and things? So it's just sort of an open question, and something that I think we could come back and visit in that working group if people have got ways they want to look at it. And we could bring in potentially one of the companies we're working with, where we're working on that sustainability trail for the city centre to kind of have that discussion with us. But I just think we need to just make it so the whole city feels like we're on that sort of journey, rather than it just being a moment in time where you see it on the TV or you see it in the paper. Otherwise, if we keep doing the same thing, we're never going to make any difference, are we? So we've got to find some different ways to communicate.
Thank you, Polly. Councillor Stables.
Just thinking about that, do we link up different activities across the different council sites well? So, you know, are we advertising things like that? We could advertise in all the parks, for example. We could advertise it on the website when you go in to look up about Temple Newsom. You could see about a sustainability or something else that's happening in other areas. Do we link things up effectively?
Not as effectively as we could, I think, would be the honest answer. So I think we're getting more towards that. We're going to talk later on today about Tropical World and what they do. And the animal keepers at Tropical World work much more closely now with those at Lotherton, and we look at how their conservation projects can complement each other. So we're definitely starting to do more. It's always a bit of a capacity issue, but yeah, it's definitely something we are looking at.
Thank you, Polly. Anybody else? Councillor Tudor.
Yeah, I agree with all the ideas of the more subtle stuff or the visual stuff around the city. I just trying to say, really, I think the traditional, quite a traditional idea of just telling people in very direct advertising ways the achievements. I mean, it's nothing new. I think a lot of us say it a lot, and we say, oh, we should do more of it. But you know, even just like billboards in the city centre, or the drum things in the city centre saying the council has done this, because you know, imagine it like if you want car insurance, what comes into your head? Go Compare Man or Meerkat into every person's head. And if that's the aim, then it's about getting this message not just once but repeatedly into people's, you know, line of sight, really. And then people will, you know, the people I personally bludgeon with it, they start repeating it back to me, and then I know it's worked. But yes, I totally agree. We want to celebrate what's been achieved, and you know, try and get the 850,000 people in our area to realise the good stuff that's going on.
Thank you. Did you want to come back on that, Polly?
The only thing I was going to say, Councillor Rafiq had asked me to share a video on Leeds pipes that we've done, so it's myself. Yeah, I think you did ask me to play it here, but that was too much to bear, so I'm just going to send it afterwards. So, yeah, of me, Councillor Rafiq, and the MD of Vital Energy, and it's just a 3-minute short clip, so it's taken from the Sky documentary, shortened down, and it's going to be used on Millennium Square, which I can hardly wait for, and also on social media. But the idea of that, again, is just to make it more visible, and it explains, the MD from Vital explains in quite a simple way what district heating is, but then we talk about how the benefits it's brought and how it ties in with our kind of climate ambitions. So we're starting to do it, but I think you're right, you can never do enough ultimately.
Thank you. Councillor Stables.
Sorry, just to come back on that, because it just made me think about the outer areas. So the outer areas of Leeds don't get to hear they don't have an idea of what is going on in terms of all this positivity. I don't think they're getting this message clearly, and I think we really need to look at how we get that information out. So I absolutely agree with billboards and things in the city centre, but what can we do in the outer areas as well to pass that good message across? Because I'm sure it's probably similar in Otley that, you know, there is this, we forever get the talk about, well, why do I pay my council tax if my bins aren't emptied? But you know what I mean? That is a constant theme, that the council does nothing for us out here. It's all in the city centre. But I think if we can start telling these positive stories about how we are helping the environment and how we're getting to net zero, I think that's a really positive message for everyone in the city. But I think the people that aren't getting it, I don't know if this is the case, but certainly in our area, people are not getting that message, and it will really help get a positive message about the council out to the outer areas if we can tell that story. I don't know how we do it. We need to think about that, but I think it'd be really powerful.
Did you want to come back on that, Polly?
I was just going to say it might be quite a good theme for one of the working groups to have a think about that. I know before we've been to community committees and we've talked about what the direct impact in areas. So we've talked about like the EV charging points or the social housing or private housing projects that have been done in an area. So we've tried to kind of really bring it back to local level in terms of projects. And maybe it's time just to go through and do a bit of that analysis again, so that there are some really specific case studies for each area, or if we've had sort of public buildings in areas that have been done, or schools or whatever. So yeah, let me have a think about it, but maybe we use that as one of the working group topics.
Thank you, Polly. I've got Councillor Tudor, then I've got quite a few people wanting to come in afterwards. Okay, Councillor Tudor first. Thank you.
I say this periodically as well. There are limits to what can go in, but the annual council tax letter to every resident, I think, is an opportunity to put in the facts about the achievements. That's it.
Thank you. Councillor Carlisle's next.
Yeah, brief one. It was coming on, I think we were both on development plans panel as well. One of the things I did want to point out, present company accepted, that sometimes in outer areas the elected members there aren't best at selling the virtues and the positives of the councils, which I see in my own area, where sometimes communities have been informed that the council hasn't cared about them for a long period of time, and they tend to believe that. My view would be very different than that, and that we are a council right to the edges of the borders of Leeds and sometimes beyond, and we support residents in that. I'm sure we'll all have slightly different views on it, but sometimes that then creates that difficult message that we're working our way through, and that's something we did have a discussion on development plans panel a little bit about as well, didn't we? And I think sometimes it's a bit ironic that some of the members that are concerned about our message not getting out are ones who sometimes are promoting messages that are probably opposite to the messages we'd put out. As I say, I'm not speaking about the members from outer areas here, of which I class myself as one. In the Labour group, I'm known as the furthest out, I think, and you can classify as which way you mean that is.
Thank you, Councillor Carlisle. Councillor Downs.
Thanks, Chair. Just taking up on the points that have been raised. In my ward, it's sort of split into two halves. So we've got Otley, which has a town council, which does have quite a strong environmental agenda. They own Gallows Hill, for example, which is a nature reserve, and there's a lot of work that goes on there. But then nestling between the two towns, there's the Chevin, where there's a lot of work from Leeds City Council going on there, which is good, positive stuff. And then you flip over to Yeadon, where you've got Yeadon Banks, you've got Yeadon Tarn, and you've got the engine fields. So there's plenty of areas where there are ecology groups and there are people doing things. And there's one or two groups within my ward. I'm not sure whether, I think one of them has been to this committee before. And so there's a lot going on in our community about our community. So I understand what you're saying about what are Leeds doing. But for people in my community, they're not perhaps so worried about what Leeds are doing. It's what's happening within their ward, and there is plenty happening. So, and there is, the Town Council have an Otley Matters newsletter which goes out, I think, 6 times a year, and that includes you know, environmental aspects in there. So I think we're reasonably well served, and it may even be that that's something that you know, the committee might want to have a look at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, and they're very welcome to come along and talk to us at Open Forum. Councillor Rafiq.
Thank you, Chair. I think on this journey, everyone has a role to play, including all the elected members, and there's so much going on, and how we actually get the information out there. As a council, there's so much we could do, but there's so many partners out there as well. I mean, I take your point about, you know, the city centre, but, you know, as far as the network journey is concerned, it doesn't happen. It's actually what happens in our outside, you know. Recycling is one of them, tree planting. We work with every ward in the city. So, you know, there's so much everybody needs to do. You know, we're talking about electric vehicles, unless everybody has a buy-in. And probably, I think the outer areas probably has a bigger, because of the fact that people can have the charging points in their drives than the inner city areas, which are somewhat disadvantaged until the infrastructure is rolled out. So there are lots of benefits, and you know, but I think we need to kind of, you know, collectively, you know, get it out to people. Yeah, but you know, I take your point.
Brilliant, thank you. Anybody else want to come in on this item? Anything you wanted to add, Polly? Okay, so thank you for that. I thought that was a useful discussion, and we've got some actions coming out of it, some things that Polly's going to share with us, the workshop information, the EV facts, and the much awaited video. And then some things for all of us to work on, thinking about the sustainability work that Polly was mentioning, the walk in the city, the sponsorship of enclosure. What can we do? And I think you summed it up really nicely, Polly, saying what can we do to make the whole city think that, you know, we're all on this journey together. So, you know, that's something for us all to think about and perhaps share with colleagues in terms of areas that we know well in our wards. Is there somewhere that we could use some way to amplify this message? Yes.
Apologies, but I'm not clear on that. So in terms of the sponsorship, I don't understand. Can you just clarify what you mean? What you're looking for?
Probably less sponsorship out in the communities, or there might be opportunities, but more about how you highlight. So, for example, when Councillor Downs was talking about all the projects, actually, if somebody was walking through Otley, are they visible to people, or do you have to be from Otley to know about them? So is there something that you could do in terms of signage, or that just makes that more visible? So if you were to walk around Otley as a visitor, actually you'd be able to see that the whole town is sort of doing on that journey. The sponsorship is probably something more that we're doing corporately, and so people have suggested companies and things that we could approach for places like Lotherton or Tropical World, for example. But I think probably in a community, it's more if you've got things, you know, are there ways that we make that more prominent and visible?
Thank you, Polly. And then the last one is all the things that we've said that are going to come back to future workshops. So I would encourage you all to bring your ideas along to the next one. We haven't set a date yet, have we? But we will do. We'll put that as an action to get a date set as soon as possible and invite everybody along to that. So thank you for that. Okay, so that now takes us to item 8. So we said, if you remember, that we were going to look at themes throughout the year, and today's theme is biodiversity and nature. So do you want to start us off, Polly?
So I'm just going to do a really quick introduction. So we've got a number of people here who've already introduced themselves who are going to do presentations on specific areas. So Emma's going to start us off by looking at how this theme sits within the overall green spaces strategy and the work that we do and the sort of our overall objectives. We're then going to do a bit of a deeper dive with biodiversity net gain with Vicky. I'm just going to talk about the work, explain what biodiversity net gain is, so don't panic if you don't know what it is, but also give some of the more practical examples. Tony's then going to look a little bit more at woodland creation and what we're doing there, but also give some practical examples, so sort of a deeper dive with 3 or 4 practical examples of things we're doing across the city this year. And then pretend I'm from Tropical World, and I'm going to do a presentation on my less specialist subject of tropical world conservation. So it's just to give you a flavour of everything that's going on and some of the progress that's been made since we came last year. So I'll hand over to Emma to start us off.
Okay, hi. Thanks for having me, everybody. So I'm going to talk about biodiversity and how it fits in with the Leeds Parks and Green Spaces strategy. So the first thing I need to do is hopefully share the presentation with you all. Okay. So, as I said, I'm going to talk about biodiversity and how it fits in with the Leeds Parks and Green Spaces strategy. So, as a reminder, the idea of the strategy was to set out a vision for how we manage our parks and green spaces over the 10 years that the document covers, and how we would deliver that vision. So, the vision is to provide the best parks and green spaces in the UK, and we will do that by focusing on 8 priorities, one of which is climate and biodiversity, so that's what I'm going to focus on today. In terms of how the priorities were identified, there was lots of background research into the benefits of parks and green spaces. So there's been national studies and local. So for example, there was a government inquiry into public parks in 2016. And locally, the University of Leeds spoke to lots of residents, over 6,000 residents, about how they use parks, what they want from them, and what they think's good and what could be improved. As well as looking at that background research to find out what's important about parks and green spaces, we looked at other plans and strategies in the city. So, for example, the Best Council Ambition, the Leeds Health and Wellbeing Strategy, the Children and Young People's Plan, and how parks and green spaces could contribute to them. And then we did a large-scale public consultation on the proposals for the strategy. So this is the strategy summed up in a page. You can see the 8 priorities on there, including climate and biodiversity. So the specific aim about for the climate and biodiversity priority is to increase wildlife and biodiversity and reduce the impacts of climate change. So probably preaching to the converted, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of background about why biodiversity was identified as a priority. There is a biodiversity emergency, there's no doubt about it. Biodiversity is in steep decline. There's some examples on here, you probably can't read them, of information to back up what I'm saying. But, for example, the World Wildlife Fund produced a report in 2024 that estimated that global wildlife populations have declined by 69% since 1970. And another reputable report, the State of UK Nature, suggested that the UK is one of the most nature-depleted countries in the world. And that doesn't just apply to those rare species on a remote Scottish island. It affects all wildlife, basically, in the country. For example, we've lost 97% of our flower-rich grasslands since 1930. We've lost 40 million birds, including common species that you can see in Leeds. So things like starlings have declined by 70%, house sparrows by 60%. A quarter of British mammals are under threat of extinction, including those that we can see in Leeds that are common, like hedgehogs. And I know that even since I've been working for the council, we've lost one of our mammals, water vole, from our watercourses. So this is happening here locally. And as a Parks and Green Spaces service, we're in a lucky position. We manage 4,000 hectares of green space. So there's a chance that we can make a difference. These green spaces can be habitats, and they are habitats for a range of wildlife. And we want to ensure that we're protecting wildlife on our sites and that we're also helping it to thrive. So that's one of the reasons we're doing it. By doing that, we're not only helping wildlife, but we're helping people as well. So at the extreme end, humanity relies on biodiversity for its own survival, for the food we eat and the air that we breathe. But also there's lots of evidence that there's health and well-being benefits of spending time in nature. So it can make it a really nice place to live if our city's full of wildlife and nature. And it's not just us assuming this, it's the feedback that we get. So all the way down from national studies by the HLF to local studies, people are telling us that they want our green spaces to be full of nature, and that's why they use them. So, for example, in the big Leeds climate conversation, 95.5% of respondents agreed that protecting the biodiversity of wildlife should be a priority for the city. And when we consulted in particular on the Parks and Green Spaces strategy and asked what positive changes would you like to see in our parks and green spaces over the next 10 years, the most common answer was around improving them for wildlife, the environment and climate. There's some of the quotes on the side, but we've got lots. So I know you can't read this, but it gives you the general idea. For all the priorities in the strategy, we have a table, and on the left it sets out our goals in relation to that priority, and on the right it's the actions that we've committed to doing to deliver those goals. So what I'm going to do now is focus very much on biodiversity and the goals related to them and the actions and the work that we've done to deliver them. So the first goal that I'm sure you're all very aware of is to plant 50 hectares of trees every year. You'll be aware, trees are fantastic for wildlife. There's loads of species that rely on them, obviously birds, insects, but also things like fungi, bluebells, wood anemones, snowdrops, all rely on the woodland habitat for their survival. So planting these trees obviously helps biodiversity and wildlife, as long as it's done sensitively, because we need to be aware that there are habitats that trees are detrimental in, and there are species that can't survive in woodlands. So things like skylarks, barn owls, harvest mice, insects like crickets, grasshoppers, might rely on other, like grasslands, for example, where trees are not appropriate. But obviously, tree planting sensitively and appropriately makes a big difference. And you'll have seen it around the city. You'll have seen the tree planting that we've done and how it's improved the diversity of many of our green spaces. I think Tony's going to talk a bit more about the details of that. But in terms of the actions that we have in the strategy, it was to identify suitable sites for woodland planting, seek external funding to deliver tree planting and maintain the trees, and then to plant 50 hectares of woodland a year. We've made really good progress with that, which Tony will run through. Hundreds of sites have been identified by council officers, partners and the general public as well. And we've secured £1.5 million worth of funding over the time since the strategy was published in 2022 to deliver that goal. So I'll leave that to Tony to fill in the details after this. The second goal is for all our woodland management to meet the UK Forestry Standard and the UK Woodland Assurance Standard, which is we call UCWAS for short. And basically this standard is about responsible and sustainable woodland management. And there's several criteria that it's measured by, and one of them is nature conservation. So it's making sure we're managing our woodlands in a way that is sensitive to nature, as well as meeting several of the criteria. So we've achieved this woodland, this UCWAS standard for many years now, and we continue to deliver on it by monitoring our sites regularly and undertaking woodland management where we can. The third goal is a big one, really. If we really want to make a difference to biodiversity in this city, we have to do this. It's a bit of a mouthful, but I'll read it out. To increase the quantity, quality, size, variety and connectedness of wildlife habitats on our green spaces. So this came out of a report that the government commissioned in 2010, which was undertaken by somebody called Professor Sir John Lawton. He was asked to investigate the state of the UK's ecological and nature sites. And he found that they were in a bad state, nature's in decline, as mentioned. And he recommended that these sites should be bigger, better and more joined up. So basically, this goal is about having our natural habitats bigger, better and more joined up. So I'm going to stick to that phrase, it's easier to say than this. And there's quite a lot of actions under this goal. So I'll split it down into like general green space management and then management of our sites that are specifically designated for wildlife, so our nature reserves. So I'll start with the simpler ones, the parks and other green spaces like that. So the first action was to reduce the area of seasonal bedding in our green spaces and replace them with wildlife-friendly alternatives, which we did in 2022. We reduced them by 50% and replaced them with bedding, like you can see here, which is a wildflower meadow at Farnley Park. Obviously, they look fantastic. They're a little bit less reliable than the annual bedding that we used to use, dependent on the weather, soil conditions and stuff like that. But you can see with the naked eye that they're so much better for insects and pollinators, and they look fantastic when they're in full bloom. We also had a goal to increase the knowledge and understanding of nature conservation among our team, so that our site managers understand how they can manage their sites better for wildlife, and also feel confident to do that. So Vicky here developed a training session, which we now do annually. 29 members of staff have been trained since the strategy was published, and it's definitely had an impact on the ground, and it's enabled where changes have been made to make our sites more biodiverse. Staff feel confident to be able to talk to the public about it. And then in relation to this goal, we've also got an action to plan for our community and city parks to have a minimum of 25% natural habitat. So we're basically rolling that out. There are some sites where it's not appropriate, where it's a tiny little site and it's got sports pitches on it, but where it's possible, we try and do it. And we use this park in the picture, Moortown Park, as an example of what our parks might start to look like in the future. This was a new community park that was opened in 2018, and as you can see, it feels a little bit more wild. It's got areas of long grass, shrubs, young and old trees. It feels very biodiverse while you're there, but it also provides the facilities that people want from a park. It's got playground, mown grass for like if you want to kick about with a football. The community, it's really popular, used by dog walkers, you know, children, families alike, but it provides that biodiversity. In fact, it's quite interesting because if you walk around, you can see little trails through the bushes and stuff that children have formed and little dens, and it's obvious that kids really enjoy that kind of environment. So moving on to those nature conservation sites that we've got 47 designated nature sites. So we've got 3 sites of special scientific interest, 15 local nature reserves, and I think it's I can't add it up now, 29 local wildlife sites, something like that. And the actions in relation to these sites, well, I should say they're particularly important. The reason they're designated is because they've either got slightly rarer habitats or rarer species on them. So it's important, if we care about the diversity element of biodiversity, that we look after these sites carefully, or we'll lose those rarer species. And obviously nationally that can be impactful as well as locally. So there's some species on here that you might not think that you'd see in Leeds, but they do live on our own Leeds City Council sites. So I think not many people know that we've got glowworms living on one of our sites, and common lizards, and lots of other interesting species. So the actions in relation to these sites are basically to make sure we've got proper nature conservation management plans in place, so we know how to manage them properly to support biodiversity on them, and then to deliver these management plans on the ground and to monitor the sites to make sure we're not losing any wildlife. Because of the limited resources in our service, we're also looking to work with partners, volunteers, and to seek external funding to deliver that work. So in terms of progress, 28 out of the 47 designated sites managed by ourselves have got a management plan at the moment. There is ongoing monitoring of many of the sites. Natural England monitor the triple SIs, West Yorkshire Ecology monitor the local wildlife sites, and UCWAS that I talked about earlier, we monitor the woodland sites through that. I thought I'd just also throw in that we do have some special interest groups operating locally that keep an eye on particular species. So we've got West Yorkshire Bat Group. The Air Rivers Trust have just started an interesting project surveying river flies in some of our becks. These indicate, if they're there, they indicate clean water. And apparently there was recently, it's a citizen science, so they train volunteers to do it. And recently they did find a beck in another local authority that didn't have these species, which indicated pollution, and that led through to them approaching Yorkshire Water to have that sorted out. So yeah, we keep an eye on those glowworms, and we also do surveys for protected species like bats and great crested newts, where we're going to be making changes on a site, which is actually a legal requirement. In terms of delivering the management plans, we're really lucky to have two key partners in the RSPB and the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust. They manage 10 nature reserves between them. I think Tony's going to talk more about the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust. 12 nature reserves between them. Yeah, and you'll probably know the RSPB manage Fair Binnings and St Aidan's. They do a really good job there. And we're really lucky that we've got lots of volunteers interested in protecting and enhancing biodiversity in the city who work with us. So even just recorded as working with our ranger team, we've had 3,000 volunteer days spent doing nature conservation since this strategy was published. And that doesn't include the volunteers working for the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust and the RSPB. On top of that, we also have friends of groups like the Friends of Gipton Woods who look after their sites really effectively, and other special interest groups like the Yorkshire Non-Native Species Forum, Leeds coppice workers who do lots of work to support our sites as well. And then in terms of external funding, B&G is something that's starting to make a difference to how we can manage our sites, and Vicky's going to talk a lot more about that, so I won't go into the detail. We've currently got something called the Water Environment Improvement Funding projects going on. They're led by the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, funded by the Environment Agency to improve the quality of local water and reduce the risk of flooding. So they're going to be projects in along the Meanwood Beck, Wortley Beck and at Rothwell Country Park. There's other ways that we can manage our sites that can help fund them as well as manage the habitats. So we fund some of our woodland management through sales of timber, and Vicky's been developing relationships with local farmers who like to take the hay to feed their animals, and that helps us manage our wildflower meadows. There's various other grants as well. I think Tony's going to talk about some of the particular externally funded schemes later. So that's that big goal. And now I'm going to move on to some more simpler ones. So we had a goal to eliminate the use of peat in our operations, which, as I'm sure you're aware, is often used as a growing medium. It's taken from peat bogs, which is a really rare habitat internationally. We don't have peat bogs in Leeds, but obviously we still don't want to damage other people's habitats in other authorities. So we've stopped selling peat at the Arium, and we've stopped using it as a growing medium, so that action is complete. And then we had a goal for zoos to retain the BIASA accreditation for conservation of the natural world and education. I think Polly's going to talk a little bit more about this in terms of what they've been doing at Tropical World and Roundy Park. But the idea of being a member of BIASA is that you are running a zoo for the benefit of the natural world, not just so people can go look at animals. So it requires you to do things like have really good animal welfare, conserve the natural world, educate people and do research for the benefit of the natural world. So we've been achieving that accreditation for many years, And as I say, Polly's going to talk more about Tropical World. The images here are just really nice ones of a new project at Lotherton, where this year they sowed a wildflower meadow for the benefit of local butterflies and had this mural and information about the butterflies alongside it. And then the final goal acknowledges that we can't deliver this without the support of our local residents in the city, and it can't be sustainable unless children understand it and are on board and love wildlife and want to protect it into the future. So we've got a goal to provide activities for over 5,000 children and adults a year to inspire them about nature, teach them about wildlife and how they can help preserve it. We've been really successful in delivering this. We've got a education programme based at Lotherton and Tropical World alongside the zoos, but also there's opportunities for children to go out, help with tree planting, tree seed collection, look at local wildlife by doing bug hunting, pond dipping and things like that at nature reserves like the Chevin and Middleton Park. And since the strategy was published 3 years ago, 32,000 children have attended a workshop to learn more about wildlife and nature. We also had an action to promote wildlife-friendly gardening at the Arium, so we do now sell relevant seeds and plants and provide information about how people can support wildlife in their gardens, because obviously gardens do make up quite a lot of the green space in the city. And then the last action is to, when planning new developments that we're undertaking ourselves, to consider ways that we can integrate environmental improvements and environmental education into those schemes. So we always do that. It's actually a bit more of a condition of BNG anyway, of biodiversity net gain. So for example, where we've got a planning application in for a playground at Lotherton currently, we are seeking to improve the habitat in the orchard at Lotherton as part of that scheme. And we also, you'll have seen signage on our parks and green spaces, but where we get funding to make changes, there's very often, if not always, information about the wildlife that you can see there so that people can learn a bit more about it. So that's the actions that we've committed to do and where we are with them in relation to the strategy. I just wanted, before I ended, to talk a little bit about the challenges and opportunities of delivering these actions. So obviously, as usual, the first challenge and the biggest challenge is capacity. We've got a lot of green space to manage for all the people of Leeds. So it's quite difficult for us to have the resources, the time and the funding to manage all our natural habitats as well as we'd like to do. We also have conflicting demands for our public green spaces and different opinions from the different people of Leeds. So we're trying to provide green space that everybody in the city of Leeds and all the visitors to Leeds can enjoy, and everybody's got different priorities. So some people really like sites that look really wild and some like it all neat and manicured. So it's just trying to get that balance. And also the balance between other facilities such as sports pitches, which are very much in demand and support our other priority of health and well-being, but aren't so good for biodiversity and wildlife. We obviously continue to struggle with antisocial behaviour. So, for example, obviously litter, dog fouling can be a challenge, and people setting fire to long grass, dead wood, can be a challenge. And then lastly, climate change can impact on how we can manage biodiversity across the country. It brings diseases like ash dieback, which is really devastating our ash trees at the moment, and the changes in weather can impact on wildlife that's adapted to our previous weather conditions. So that's why it's really important to make sure our wildlife habitats are bigger, better and more joined up to help wildlife become more resilient to climate change. And then in terms of the opportunities, I've talked about things like working with partners, volunteers, external funding. I think there's still room to look at how we manage our green spaces. We can still manage them, some of them better for wildlife. So there's still opportunities to keep developing some of our sites. And it's quite interesting that the government are increasingly putting biodiversity on the agenda and are working to halt the decline in biodiversity in the country. The Environment Act in 2021 introduced biodiversity net gain, which should have an impact on how development affects biodiversity, and it also brings in this new funding stream via developers of biodiversity net gain. There's also a requirement for local nature recovery strategies to be produced. West Yorkshire Combined Authority are working on that. And the idea of these schemes is that it can bring new partnerships between the public, private and third sectors together for biodiversity on a landscape scale. And I'm hoping it'll bring in a bit more funding as well. So that's me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you ever so much, Emma. Really, really interesting presentation. I think what I'm going to do is just pause there before we move to anybody else, just to see if anybody's got any questions on anything that you've presented. Okay. Well, I was just going to. I was going to say, if anybody does feel, you feel free, Emma, to say that one's going to come up later, or refer it to somebody else later in the presentation. But just wondered, just give people that opportunity.
Can I just say something I forgot to say?
Yeah, you certainly can. Yes.
I just wanted to say something I forgot today, which is a really nice story. Working with volunteers at a site called Brewery Marsh, which is near Golden Acre Park, our rangers, along with the volunteers, have managed to create a habitat that has brought harvest mice back to the site. They've not been seen there since 1975, and they're so cute. So, yeah, I just wanted to mention that. So, it's important to know that we can make a difference. It's actually quite easy. If you manage the habitats, the wildlife will come. You've seen the example as well of red kites. That we didn't have any in Yorkshire. They were extinct and they've successfully returned. So I just wanted to say, it is worth making the effort.
Brilliant, absolutely. Thank you, Emma. So I don't see anybody indicating Councillor Tudor's got a maybe. do you want to go with it? And then Emma, if somebody's going to address it later, just say we'll come back to it.
It might be later. And very disjointed list of thoughts, but everything is a balance, isn't it? Of we've got house building, wonderful council house building in Seacroft, but then we see the other side of people saying, "Oh well, that boring green field, that's where all the old people walk their dogs." And the nearest one is further away. So none of this is criticism, but there's that balance all the time, isn't it, of where you and a very difficult thing of trying to do a good balance, do your best about building houses that are needed, planting whips, or trees, which is taking up some space, although it's obviously a good thing, and balancing it with that stuff about what you were saying about the importance of green spaces, for residents to enjoy and be able to, see a green vista and that sort of thing. Again, not a criticism, but it does. I am aware that as we do plant more, which is brilliant, we get a lot of casework of people saying, the large tree outside my house is neglected and I can't get forestry to do anything about it. Not your fault, but there is that thing of capacity and budgets, that some of the trees across the city, of which there are many, many thousands, aren't being looked after as well as they could be for their own health, while we plant lots more to maybe not be able to look after in the future. Sorry, a bit of a Debbie Downer there. We're just doing our best. It would be really interesting to hear more about the Yorkshire Water Improvement projects. I'm new to the board today, so I don't know whether that's happened before, because we've got a project in our area which is sort of started up quite recently, and it wasn't one of the areas you mentioned. So we've got the Whitebeck Water Watchers residents who are looking at the stretch of Whitebeck through Seacroft and carrying on from there. So I'm sure I'll definitely be telling them about the projects. There might be some link up there. And then lastly, just it tangented in my mind to, and I know nothing on this topic of what's going on with. I hear some complaints about rubber crumb pitches in the city. You know, when you see people online, and that's often in our green spaces as well. Of whether what the policy is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tudor. Polly's going to start unpicking some of those.
Okay, so I suppose picking up the first one around the house building and things sits probably more with planning, but I suppose from our point of view, it is about placemaking. So, and there's lots of really good examples. So if you look at the Air Park development, where actually the green space was integral to that development. If we look at what's happened with the East Leeds expansion, with the new housing that's come there, with that came Elaw, and all the new green space there, the new play areas and things. So I think it's really important, that strategic planning, to make sure that that is taken into account. So even if it brings about change, that it's change that's done in a thoughtful way. In terms of the forestry is always a challenge for us in terms of, you know, managing trees and a bit similar to what Emma was saying earlier about everyone's got a different view about what a tree should be or not be. People are upset if a tree is cut down, other people want it cut within an inch of its life. I suppose in terms of the new tree planting, I would say the majority of that is done within areas where it will present less of a future problem. So in terms of in parks and green spaces, or if even when we're doing standard trees, you know, then we're doing less, I suppose, roadside planting, which is where we tend to get more issues and conflict. So I think that most of what we're doing kind of in expansion of tree canopy cover will create less of a problem. We have got the ash dieback programme that's going on now, which will start to address some of the tree problems we've got, but it would be disingenuous of me to say that it's going to solve all our problems, because they keep growing and they keep coming back. So, but we are trying our best to manage them. I'd have to pass over to maybe to Emma. I don't know on the Yorkshire water improvement one.
I don't know the full details, but I'm happy if someone was to get in touch with me to pass on the contacts. Yeah, is that okay?
I'm not going to profess to be an expert, Councillor Tudor, in the relative environmental benefits or not of rubber crumb. I'm aware that this has been a hotly discussed topic. I'm aware that there's been some EU regulations that's limited future sales of rubber crumb. I think what we look at artificial pitches generally, Executive Board heard a report recently that said that the city is deficient in artificial pitches by about 20. We're about to invest thick end of £20 million in artificial pitches at Woodhall and at Green Park. They can be used significantly more intensively. They're an excellent resource in terms of health benefit. When you look at grass provision, if I was to put a state-of-the-art drainage system in a grass pitch, the maximum I could achieve would probably be 7 hours use per week, whereas an artificial pitch can be used to 80 hours per week. So when you look at it in that context, they are significant in terms of their health benefit and their regenerational benefit as well. I know that this issue has been discussed. I know it's been considered as part of the environmental impact assessments that will have been done as part of the work that's taking place at Green Park and Woodhall. But I would come back to the investment the city is making in that recreational developments that we're doing there is significant and will make a big difference to people's health and well-being. Thanks.
Thank you. So I've got Councillor Rafiq next.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just going to say that. I mean, thank you, Emma, for the presentation, and it just shows that huge amount of work that goes probably unnoticed. People don't realise both the importance of biodiversity and the importance of actually maintaining, creating and improving wildlife habitats and the work that goes on, because I think often members of the public and even members probably think that the sex teams, it's all about maintaining parks and play areas, and but there's a lot of work that goes on, and and thank you for that. And then I think it's probably going through that in 10 minutes doesn't do you justice. So thank you, for all you and your teams do. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Rafiq, and I think we would all echo that for certain. Councillor Downs.
Thanks. Just a couple of things. One is, I noticed you were talking about your objectives of engaging with 5,000 children and adults, but the slide then went on to say that over the last 3 years you'd actually engaged with 30,000, which is 10,000 a year, so you're already well past double that target, so congratulations on that, although it may be a bit of a low target, but it's really good to see, because the more people we can engage in that is really positive. Moving on to the threat to certain animals, it is of great concern that we've seen some die out, and we're seeing some die out, and if there's more that we can do with biodiversity to help these species, I think that's something we should be looking at. But one quick question: you said about at Brewery Marsh you've got field mice back, which is house mice. I thought you said harvest mice. Yes, sorry, harvest mice. I'm not an expert on mice. I had an infestation of mice at my house. I live in a, well, where I live, it's next to some woods, etc. And I humanely caught them and took them to an area more than a mile away, which is what it said on the internet to do. Is there an issue with different species of mice if I haven't got the right one, or would it be worth me taking to Brewery Marsh, which is only a couple of miles away?
Yeah, so the harvest mice talk about, they're very specific habitat requirements, so you're probably not going to have those at your house, but yeah, I mean, yeah, you can take them over there if you want to. It's not going to have the impact on the harvest mice that are there, if that's your question.
That was my question,
Yeah, okay.
because if I do get them again, as I say, I've just been letting them out near a field that's about a mile and a half away in Bramhope, but away from houses. And it's just that if we're trying to, if that's a better location for them, I'd happily take them there, because it's only an extra mile and a half.
I don't think it's going to have any positive or negative impacts, to be honest, where you take them. So yeah, take them where you want to. Is my advice.
Brilliant, thank you. Councillor Carlisle.
Thank you. I will come in with some of mine now, but yeah, more than happy for somebody to tell me they'll be talking about that later, or answering a question. I think there's some absolutely fantastic work in there, and it's a plan that I've always been very supportive of. There's then the difficulty of how you take all the residents along with you, which is the one that I know I've spoken to many people around, and we've done some really good work on that. Sometimes I think we haven't quite got there, but that's fine. We're learning each time as we do it. There's some really good stuff going on. One of our parks has recently had the plan on a page for a park done, and that was a great way of interacting with the local community. That particular park was given to the people of Farsley, in fact, by a wealthy mill owner 100 years ago. So very good to do that there, because it is theirs actually, rather than more than it is ours as a council, should we say, in the way people look at it as an area. But that was fantastic work, and we were able to really have some good conversations there around which areas would be suitable for tree planting. A lot of people welcoming the tree planting there. Concerns around antisocial behaviour if the park was perceived to be then more dark and such, but we're able to have that conversation. I think sometimes when we've gone on the tree planting alone, the consultation hasn't been as in-depth as that, and that's when it's quite difficult, because we consult, should we put trees in this bit of the park or not, rather than, here's your park, what would you like us to do with it? So I think that plan on the page consultation has been really positive. I was just wondering further, Andrew, talking about how we further localise some of that work, especially around volunteers. I can see that there is a huge opportunity for a number of people in the community. I mean, I've got guerrilla gardening groups that are going on bits of highways land and planting various things that I don't tell them off for, but I probably should, but I'll leave the highways department to do that if they so wish. But there's a unique opportunity for you to be bringing those people together in some really positive work that is positive for the climate emergency, positive for anxiety about the climate emergency among young people and older people, and positive for getting more done in our parks than we would necessarily have the budget to do. I think there will be many volunteers that would help with that in a local area, nearby residents and various others, that would come out of the woodwork just to do it of their own bat. But there's also a lot of local groups that probably would and would be looking for that, and I think that's one where local ward members could help. And yes, there may not be a friends of group for a particular park, but there probably are a lot of friends of that park and local groups looking for things to do. I mean, one of the other things that tangentially I went off on was then around the social prescribing style of things, and the, what do they call the gym thing? Is it a good gym? The green gym, yeah. And that kind of look, we're socially prescribing a number of things that would be walking groups, various other activities, sporting activities and such, actually getting in and getting involved in your park, as they do at Rodley Nature Reserve near me, and I'm sure they do at many others. There's volunteers down there every Wednesday and Saturday, doing a bit of work, meeting up as a group, tackling various bits of isolation, getting active and doing something really positive for both themselves and the environment. So I wonder whether that's something we've looked into and whether Adults and Health could help us on that, because it's not really your job to do that, but you have the opportunity and the facilities that could really benefit other departments and other plans. And alongside that, I was just wondering around some of the messaging we put out, which I think a lot of the messaging we have and a lot of the detail is absolutely fantastic in terms of the Woodland Creation Project, the benefits of that, the benefits of the plan that you've got and biodiversity and such. I'm not sure we're always as good at putting that on information boards where people want to see it. There's always a step in the way. Now, I appreciate there's a lot of cost. So when there's tree planting, we do put up the sign of why that's there and what it's there to do. It probably doesn't go into as much detail as we can in various other areas. But I think some of the other things around biodiversity, the improvements we might make to our parks, could really do with being better communicated within parks, within the parks themselves. Because I think a lot of it is probably in a plan that's hidden away somewhere on a website, and we probably don't shout about it when people want to know with it, which is when they're in the park and saying, why is that long grass there? We could very clearly explain that, and I do that in a 2-page email, but a resident probably will get in touch with me saying, why are the lazy people not mowing the park? That is not it, and I send them a very detailed explanation. Not all members send the same explanation, I will say. Some members will send one that isn't kind to the Parks Department on that, and probably doesn't look to take advantage of the policies that we have in place that are very positive. The same with highways mowing, I'll say. So now there would be, I think, a lot of support from members and from community committees, and the possibility of budgets there to try and help with some of that work in the same way we would about getting private advertising. I'm going off on a monologue here, Chair, sorry. In the same way we would with private advertising. I just wondered whether we thought of that as well. So I guess I'll leave my other points till later, but there's that point around really trying to get local people helping with a park and really engaging with the service on a local level. It's very difficult to do, but I think there probably is a lot positive there. Some of that social prescribing, I wondered if we'd ever thought about it, and then how the rest of us can help get these messages into parks, so it's not just a job for the park service to do, because it is everyone's job to try and promote the benefits that you could have through that park, and to let people know what they can do to make a positive impact on the climate more generally. Thank you.
I think what you're saying is sort of harking back to what you were talking about at the beginning about marketing and communications. We do have lots of volunteers, as I've said, and lots of engagement. I should shout out the Leeds Wildlife Volunteers. So there is a group that goes around the wildlife sites helping to maintain them. And we've got the ranger team who help coordinate volunteer tasks. So I think there's probably a bit more to do on promoting that service. And again, it's similar with the signage. So where we do have funding with the Woodland Creation and with the B&G, we always accompany any works with information signage so people know, but it's just where we don't have that funding, so any support would be gratefully received.
So one of the things we've done probably in about the last 6 months is look at how the rangers work. So what I think had started to happen was they stay in areas where we've got really well-established parks groups, and what we started to do now is look at actually moving to areas where we don't have that to try and engage with different residents. It's still very, very early days. But we are looking at how we use the ranger facility. Again, it comes back to capacity. There's not enough of them to be able to cover all of our estate, but it's looking where there's the most need, where we are struggling to do what we need to do in an area, and there's lower engagement naturally. Just, I suppose, you made the comment about sort of woodland creation versus the plan on the page consultation, and I think there's always going to be that challenge, because we have to do so much in terms of the 50 hectares a year. You know, you can never do such an in-depth consultation, so that does continue to present a challenge for us. I think all the time that target's there, that will continue to be difficult. Yeah, and I think Emma's already picked up on the sort of BNG and things. The only one I'm less sure on is the social prescribing, so I was just going to say Tony.
So I think my comment to that, Council, would be to just highlight that the service is really well connected with colleagues in Active Leeds. Always has been a good working relationship with them. Obviously, Active Leeds are pushing and promoting on activity generally. We're joined up in terms of that strategy. We recognise the service that we've got a tremendous asset in those 4,000 hectares. I think one of our challenges is about how we animate and activate those spaces, and if we can do that and achieve that, whether that just be engagement in environmental improvements or just people generally feeling a sense of ownership and commitment to their local green space, that can tackle all sorts of issues, but the negative side of the ASB, but also allow us to make positive improvements. Over the years, there's been various initiatives that I could refer back to: health walk proposals, green gym proposals, lots of anecdotal feedback I could offer in terms of you put on a walk at 4 o'clock every single Tuesday, you're always limited. That's not always the best use of resource and time. I think our mission and our goal has to be about how we enable as many groups as possible to use these tremendous assets that we've got within communities. That networked approach, that more broad look at anchor organisations within an area that's been going on with Joel Keddy's team in Active Leeds. We're connected into that work, certainly around priority neighbourhood areas, and just making sure that green spaces are as able as possible for whomever's offering a social prescribing scheme to link in with a green space. It's just not always possible with our gift for us to be the ones that push and promote that, but what we've got is these assets that we know that can be used for that purpose.
Thank you. Do you want to come back?
Come back very briefly. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And I think what ward members would really like to try and do is to try and see how we can really localise some of that offer that's there. So that what you're offering is very similar to what you are, and that's great about the ranges, as you were mentioning, Polly. But how can we help to promote that, and how can we then help promote that when that's something local? And when there's a tree planting event in my ward or somewhere nearby, we advertise that out and we get a lot of people coming. And maybe some of those areas where there is a plan on a page, that gives a bit more of an idea of what local residents could come and help with, that rangers could possibly support, and have a particular date in one park that people know they can come to, so that would be really good. Just briefly going to mention around the tree planting idea and the woodland creation, because you mentioned it really, Polly. The concern I have is that the finite amount of parks land, and I don't know whether it's suitable for this discussion or probably another, but I think there's a really useful discussion about, I think there are people within my community who would look at it, I don't really agree with them, we've got there yet, who think we've probably filled the parks with as many trees as we can. I don't think we've got there. I think I'm more than willing to look at parks very different than a big open field, and my kids would much more enjoy it where there trees all over the place and they could climb them rather than just sit in the middle of a square of grass. However, I think there's a point at which we'll come where we're running out of land. In my ward, I don't think we've got any tree planting proposals this year, because I don't think there's any parks land we've got. So I did want to see how we're talking around either A, increasing the parks estate, which would be absolutely fantastic, but I'm sure is an expensive thing to do, or B, looking at other land and how well we're working with others around housing, for instance, who I think there is a reticence about doing too much on housing land. One, because it quite rightly belongs to the residents, but the residents could have their say on what they wanted that to look like. But there's a struggle around things like relaxed mowing or planting in those areas, because I think they have an idea it will lead to increased maintenance, where I'm not entirely sure it will. And that's not always the answer. That no, because it might cost a bit more, is not always the answer that we want. because there is a budget conversation to be had around that if we decide to do it very differently. And then I wonder if at some point somebody can tell me a bit about the mulch trial you were doing, because one of the concerns people had around, are you going to come on to that, Tony? If you are, that's great. Or you've been dropped in it there to answer that. Because one of the concerns people had in my area was that when we were doing large amount of woodland creation, we were spraying stuff that they weren't particularly happy with. Yes, I appreciate what it's there for, but thankfully we've got a trial to try something a bit different, and I was wondering what that would look like. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is that something that's straying into later parts of presentations? Shall we come back to it? Yeah. Okay. We'll have one more question specifically on Emma's presentation, and then we'll move on. Thank you.
I had made a note of that point, but I'll come back to that later. It was actually about the difficulty with developments, actually, and when it's identified that there are protected species, for example badgers, in a development area, is there anything that we can do as a council to protect them? Because I'll give you an example. In our ward at the moment, there's a development where badgers are successfully it's a greenfield site, never been built on, enclosed space, so it's probably quite a wild area, and there are badgers there that are breeding, and there's a planning application on the table, and the mitigation that's been put forward for that is to build a man-made set, and I'm very concerned that is there any evidence that they're ever going to move while there's development going on to a man-made set? But on a broader level than that, if there are protected species that are identified in an area, is that something that we would look to extend our wildlife corridors to enable those species to thrive, rather than, I don't know where these badgers are going to go, basically.
I think what you're referring to is planning policy, which I don't know enough about to advise on. But obviously protected species are protected, so they have to mitigate any impact on them. I guess that's what we're aiming for in terms of the habitats, where we've got rarer and definitely protected species, to at least protect their habitats, but ideally to extend and improve them. So, yeah.
I'm thinking about the wildlife corridors. That I know there are established areas. So when we find out about protected species in other areas that aren't in protected corridors, are we taking that on board and looking at actually should these wildlife corridors be extended?
I think this is covered in the local plan. So our role as a service is to manage the sites that we've got. We don't really look at creating new sites. Where we have got the potential for corridors, or where we manage corridors, that's part of our strategy. But in terms of new green spaces and linking them up, it's more a planning approach. So the local plan leads the local nature recovery strategy, and yeah.
Thank you for that question. Thank you for that answer, and perhaps that's something that we can look at with planning. Okay, thank you for those questions and for the pause to cover those. So, Vicky, are you next on the list? Super, so over to you, thank you.
Hello, I'm Vicky Baker. I'm in the technical team in Parks, but I specifically am the biodiversity net gain officer. So I really just look at biodiversity net gain, and I should specify, I look at the delivery of it on council land and specifically within climate, energy and green spaces. So I do know the planning side of it, but I don't work on that one. That's colleagues in the planning team. So I'm going to do, I know some of you know about biodiversity net gain, but I am just going to explain what it is and then go into how we are delivering it. So what is biodiversity net gain? So I'll just read DEFRA's quote out. Biodiversity net gain, or I'll probably call it B&G from here on in, is an approach to development that aims to leave the natural environment in a measurably better state than it was beforehand, It's completely brand new. So before this came in a couple of years ago, and it was mandated last year, but before it started rolling in 2021, we didn't have anything like this. We had protected species legislation, so badgers, as just mentioned, bats, great crescent newts, all that. But in terms of habitats, unless it was a site of special scientific interest or a really rare important habitat, developers could go in and kind of get away with things. I'm saying that from I used to be a consultant, so I kind of know what developers could and couldn't do. So when this was brought in, it's world first. It's only England doing it so far, but we've got Scotland who are quite keen to do it as well. And the idea is that when you go in to put your planning app in, you have to leave biodiversity in a better state than it was beforehand. When it was mandated in 2024, that requirement increased to 10%. So I'll just give an arbitrary number. So if a development scored 10 in biodiversity units, I'll explain what that is. They have to then get 11 afterwards. It's all about, it has a hierarchy. So it will be about retaining habitats. You've got enhancing the ones that you're protecting on site, or you might be creating some new ones and making them as best as you can. So there is all a point system behind it all. But the long and short of it is you are just doing better for biodiversity. And the final and crucial bit for all biodiversity net gain, it is not just a quick answer, a quick win. It has to be maintained for 30 years. So it really is exciting, and it's brand new, and it can be big, I suppose. So, are you going to go? Yes, there we go. Okay, so as I've just kind of mentioned, biodiversity can be delivered on site and off site. So the idea and what planning will try and get you to do is deliver as much as you can on site. And developers have to pay for everything from the start. So whatever is talked about in the planning application, whether they sort it out on site or have to go to an off-site provider, it all has to be funded for by them. So when developers go in for the planning application, they can either look to their site, they might have some land off-site, and where they can't or don't have that, they will then go to other off-site providers. For example, one of the biggest ones is the Environment Bank. They don't have too much land in Yorkshire, which is good for us, but they do have them all across the UK. I should also say that developers don't have to just deliver their net losses within the same city that they're developing in. So they could go like down to Plymouth, for example, and sort their deficit out. Then just coming back into this list, they can go to environmental charities. So Yorkshire Wildlife Trust are getting involved. We've got local authority land, i.e. us, and then finally where they've gone through all that list and they can't do anything, they can go to Natural England, but their prices are very high because Natural England don't really want to be doing it. But the point of it all, they have to do this now. When it was mandated last year, developers have to do this. So I'll just show you this. This is just the background to it all, and this is how you work out the numbers, you work out the units. So there's a spreadsheet. This is just a little snippet of it. There's a lot more to it than this, but the developer and us as the council, when we're looking at the sites, which I'll come into, they will have to understand what habitats they've got on the site and then work out what condition they're currently in. And then it comes up with a score, which is the last column there. And then the development then has to have, like I said, the 10% net gain on it. So this is what we're also going to be doing when we're choosing the sites across the city and working out what we can do with them. So it might be just enhancing the habitat, for example, a lowland meadow, bring it back into management, or it might be taking some modified grassland and maybe putting a pond on it, for example. So this shows what you can do. It's an example, and also it has got the cost at the bottom. The 30k sits in between where we have been selling units and where we're going to take it in the future. But I'll just quickly summarise this. So, for example, if you can imagine 5 hectares of a mean-to grassland, so just mow and modify, really species poor. If we were going to take it and deliver B&G on it. Half of it you could make into better grasslands. So you relax mowing, which will allow more species to appear. You could maybe put species mix on to get to neutral grasslands. So, and then you can make a little bit into scrub, and you can see just the units you're going to be creating. And so if you work out the uplift, 16 habitat units, I know these are arbitrary numbers, but the point is from 5 hectares of grassland, you could then sell that area for $500,000. Remember, it is over 30 years, but they're the numbers we're kind of talking about, just so we understand it. Okay, so how it works. Is that going to change? Is there a bit of a lag? Yes, there we go. Okay, so when developers have worked out they've got a net loss on site and they know they have to deliver their deficit somewhere, they will hopefully approach us. So we need to, or we have been in the past couple of years, identifying sites. We've done full internal consultation with all the various members of staff who manage our green spaces and parks. We'll then produce an outline management plan and check that we can actually fund what we say we want to do in terms of delivering those units and making sure we can do it over those 30 years. We've carried out full due diligence checks, and then once we're happy that we can do it, we'll then go out and consult with ward members. I know some of you have seen Killingback Fields, for example, all the various friends or groups and just any other stakeholders that we're aware of or that we're told that have some involvement in the site. And then we will then finalise the plan that we're going to do. It's called a Habitat Management and Monitoring Plan, and it's Natural England's template, and planning will then sign that off. And since we mandated, Natural England will also need to see it and check it over. So it's a very thorough process to make sure that you're going to do it. You can't just say you're going to do something and take the money and then not show. Yeah, you have to show your workings and your methods. And then finally, we'll then implement for 30 years, and there's monitoring every years 1, 2, 5, etc. And Natural England will keep tabs on you all. So if we say we're going to do it, we are committed to doing it. Going back to how we're identifying those sites, because we've obviously got a lot of green space across the city. We've changed it ever so slightly we've evolved our process slightly in the pre-mandatory phase and the mandatory phase, which I'll come on to in the next slide. But it's still the same in that we are trying to choose sites that are designated for nature in some way. So rather than just your parks in the city centre, we are looking at those more natural green spaces, because they're the ones that have our protected species on, and typically they're the ones that have the most interesting habitats that are probably undermanaged. And we're also looking at where, like, connectivity, which we've spoken about a bit today, looking at green spaces that could connect up to those sites. There's also trying to find sites that have potential for delivering large number of units, and also quite specifically the variety of habitats. Developers have to deliver like-for-like habitats. So let's say they were getting rid of a pond, hopefully not. If they're getting rid of a pond, they would then have to create a pond somewhere or enhance a pond that already exists. So we are trying to find sites that have a bit of everything so we can sell that to the developers. And finally, trying to get a spread of sites across the city. We don't, I mean, some sites are easy than others, but we really have tried to try and get them across. So, but at least if it's not in someone's ward, it's in the ward adjacent. And this is based on, the opportunities here. I mean, it's quite obvious. It's brand new funding, and it's on sites that we probably rely on, like friends of groups or collaborations with, for example, Yorkshire Wildlife Trust. So it's brand new funding to help that, and also Emma's Parks and Green Space strategy, which she's gone into in depth, but it all follows those goals there. And finally, for residents and visitors. So we talked about signage a lot. It can fund signage. It can fund improving footpaths, because then that reduces the impact on the surrounding habitats. And also, in the process of all this, we've worked with various community groups and working with the Rangers team. That question gets asked to me a lot, if we can use even more. The thing with biodiversity net gain is, because we have to commit to doing it, we can't rely necessarily on community groups doing it, but it is always there that we do want to involve them. We just can't say, oh, this is going to be delivered via them. We'll want to make sure we can fund it properly and then use the community groups on top. But it is always key that we would want to use them. Just in terms of practical terms, the habitats that we have the most of across the city, woodlands and grasslands. We've got some amazing woodlands, ancient ones, long established woodlands, but we've also got a lot of plantation woodlands that were planted 30, 40 years ago and they haven't been touched, so there's so much scope for woodlands. We've got some lovely grasslands, we've got some lowland meadows, which are really rare and ancient grasslands that have essentially never been touched. And we've also got some really interesting wetlands, and they do take a bit of work because they progress quite quickly. And then some more rarer ones, so we've got heathlands at the Sherman, for example. We've got some old hedgerows, scrub and watercourses as well. So the final two slides here are where we're at. So a pre-mandatory stage involves planning applications that were submitted before February 2024. It was a bit more easy to deliver B&G on these schemes because Natural England have since confirmed the rules in place for it, but it meant that we could look at smaller sites and the schemes that we started in 2024 and will continue over the next 30-ish years. Armley Park, that was our first one. So, for example, we did woodland management there, but we also created a wildlife area and got the local friends of groups, and we have a ranger there who does a lot of work with other park visitors there. We've got some ancient / long established woodlands in Seacroft Wars. We've got Ramshead Wood, Lowood and Lime Pits Wood, which we started work there. Ascot Hill is the central photo. It's really lovely lowland meadow. We'll bring back into a management plan, so that's a cut and collect, which will improve the species diversity there over time. And finally, Dolphin Beck Marsh, it's bottom right-hand corner. That has some amazing woodland, reed beds, fen habitats. We've got a lot of non-native invasive plants there, which are really becoming an issue. And historically, there are waterfowl there. And we're doing surveys now to see if they are there. But this work, if they are still in the area, will help them to hang on and hopefully increase their population. And then the final slide is mandatory stage. So when it became mandatory in 2024, Natural enforced the rules, and it's all based on legally securing the site. So we have needed to set up a special purpose vehicle, which is called Leeds Habitat Company, and that's the logo for it there. It is more complicated than just the rules surrounding it. We've had to, rather than choosing those smaller sites, like on the previous slide, we've had to choose larger ones just because of the amount of work that goes into setting them up. The first 5 sites that we have brought on board are Killingback Fields and Lechmere Pastures, Rodwell Country Park, Skeleton Lake and Otley Sherman Forest Park. So they're all in various stages of having their baseline surveys done and getting their management plans ready. We have done consultation on all of them now, which has all been positive, and we haven't had anyone coming back for any issues. But the first 2 sites are as listed, Killingback Fields and Lechmere Pastures. They're the ones are going to be our first 2. But yeah, there's just so much scope for this in the future. I suppose challenges would be, or it's the unknown slightly, it's developers, isn't it? So we have to make sure developers do want to come, because they have lots of options across, they can go anywhere across England to secure their net losses. So yeah, making sure, I suppose we do a good job, and they're going to keep wanting to come to us, then we can keep funding other biodiversity improvements. Yes, but lots of potential. Any questions?
Thank you. Really interesting. I'm going to go to Councillor Carlisle first. So we're specifically on BNG questions.
Thank you, Chair. You said that as if I tend to veer off into a range of directions. Yeah, very specifically on BNG. Thank you. Yeah, and I've the benefit that I've seen some of the background to this on City Plans panel and seeing how we work through it on planning applications. One of the concerns we've always got over a range of things, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's green space contributions, whether it's BNG, is one, how we get it locally, but two, I guess, that mix between providing new sites or replacement sites for a loss and improving existing sites. So I just wondered if you had anything that could reassure us on this. Let's say we're losing a field with a number of bits of habitat that have to be replaced. What's the best thing to do? Would it be to insist a developer creates a new habitat on a new piece of land exactly the same, or is improving some of these sites better or just as good, I guess, is my question.
I mean, this is definitely more of a planning side of things, but there is an inbuilt mitigation hierarchy, and that does say you need to keep as much as you can on site. That's always the aim: protect and enhance what you have on site. So that there is specific. There's 10 rules in the mitigation hierarchy. You're meant to work through them. So then it would be up to planning to say, well, you haven't done enough. And I have seen the planning team going back. Like I said, I used to be a consultant. I was a consultant for 10 years, so I worked on BNG for about 4 years before I joined, and planning authorities do push back quite hard, say, well, why are you getting rid of that? You don't need it. Tweak your drawings. But yes, that is the aim. Always do as much as you can on site, and where you can't do that, you then need to deliver your losses. And it should always be in the locality as well. So while I'm saying that technically they can go anywhere in England to deliver it, I know that we are trying to get them to stay within Leeds, but we don't have anything that makes them do that now. But hopefully in future, in planning policy, if that gets amended, it will say that. Does that answer the question?
I think so. I guess. Can I come back? I guess asking a tougher question on it then. So if we're putting park sites in, what's to say we aren't getting developers to pay for things you would have had to do anyway? So essentially we're losing it. So, if a developer didn't come to improve that site, that would be something that parks did and would be expected out of their budget. A developer effectively is allowed to pay for that improvement. But if we weren't putting that site forward, they would have to pay for something else to be improved that wasn't one of ours. So what's the balance there? It's a tricky balance.
I think Polly wants to come in on that one.
Yeah, I think the reality is we won't do it though. So where, I think Emma talked about where we're under managing sites, we don't have the resource. So a lot of it, so for example, if you look at wildflower meadows where you have to take the horizons away and that, we are not set up with the resource at the moment to do that. And so what would happen? The site would be managed, it would be kept safe, litter would be picked, but we can't manage it for the best for biodiversity without that additional resource. So it is absolutely additionality that's being provided through that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but we just cannot as a council afford to do what needs to be done to maximise biodiversity.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stables first.
It's just a quick question, actually. On the slides, you did show some of the sites that you're currently being looked at and developed. Are there others?
Yes, we've got a very long list. So yeah, there's loads of potential to look at those other sites, but those first, pre-mandatory ones and then the first 5 on the mandatory were our top picks based on that criteria of trying to find them across the city and having that variety. But yeah, we've got a lot of others.
I would like to see the list because I would like to know if there's anything locally to us. So in Wetherby Ward, there's nothing at the minute, but...
Yes, we don't have much land in Wetherby Ward, do we, like Parks Department? It's a tricky ward. But yes, I can share the list, yeah.
Thank you for that. Councillor Downs.
Thanks, Chair. Three little points. One is you were talking about wetlands area. How have the wetlands fared given the drought this year? Not least because, moving on to the second point, you mentioned Otley Shevin, and obviously I'm very keen to see any additional work on there, really keen and happy to get involved. But where I walk my dog every day, there's a little pond which is still dry at the moment, completely dried out, and it normally has tadpoles, frogs, and wildlife within it, and there are newts in the area as well, which my concern is, with all the dry weather, what impact is that having on our wetlands and those areas? And I'll leave it at those two for the moment.
yeah, it's climate change, isn't it? Everyone's trying to battle with it, but I think also just trying to understand what the actual impact is. Dolphin Vet Marsh, for example, is because I've only been at council for 2 years, so I kind of understand it from that point of view, and also just manager plans that we had previously. But from colleagues on that Dolphin Vet Marsh one, for example, that it has dried up significantly, but that's also partly just slightly under management. Not that, as Polly said, we would really be managing anyway, but if we allow non-native invasive weeds in and don't manage them, they'll dry things up. So there are things that we can do, but yes, climate change is just something that we're just going to have to. Yeah, it's the unknown, really, isn't it? But yeah.
Yeah, the other point was you were saying about it has to be council land, or that's what you're looking at. Is there any way of working with parish councils that own land as well? So I'm thinking in particular, again, of Otley Town Council that own Gallows Hill in Otley, where they're doing a lot of work on that, and it may be, is it something that you can work with them because it's within Leeds and it is public property, as it were, rather than private property?
Yes, there should be. The thing is always it's leasing of land, so it's just a legality, just making sure that we can do that, and because it's committed for 30 years. But I think it is something that we can definitely look at. Yeah, Emma.
It's a very, very final point just on that. I'm very happy to sort of be the conduit with that and to try and put that in place if that's something that is something that you are able to move forward with.
I just wanted to mention that we've got these 4-5 sites, hopefully, where we're going to be delivering mandatory B&G, but how much we can actually deliver depends on the developments that happen in Leeds and whether they want to spend on B&G in Leeds. And we've no idea how much that's going to amount to. And we have got hundreds of biodiversity units on those sites. So we need to move through them, do the work on them, and then we'll move on to other sites. So it will, it'll be probably a few years before we'll move on to other sites.
Thank you. Councillor Stables, did you want to come in again?
Yeah, just to come in on that point, actually, just to say that in Boston Spa, there is a B&G development being worked up currently with the parish council. Well, I don't want it to happen, but anyway, for different reasons, because I want it to be on site rather than where they're proposing to put it. But yeah, it is something that can be done. It is complicated. Looking at it, but it is something that can be done. And my question was, actually on the back of that, was would we work with other authorities like Yorkshire Water, the Environment Agency, for example, to look at B&G on, I'm thinking of River Wharf, actually, which runs through our ward.
So watercourses are slightly more complicated than I didn't go into that too much, but I kind of just talk about habitats and linear features like hedgerows and tree lines. Watercourses are another specialty because to get the uplift in units, you need to be like modifying the watercourses, naturalising them in some ways. So our separate flood risk management team are going to be look after watercourse units. So I don't really want to speak too much for them, but they are progressing it. There's not as much demand for them. There's a lot more demand for habitats and hedgerow units, but they are looking into it, and they're looking to get accredited in order to do the surveying. But yes, from what I understand, there will be a joined approach with looking at EA, Yorkshire Water. Yeah.
There's also not just the watercourses themselves, but there's also obviously the riverbanks and all the wildlife associated along the riverbanks, like water voles, for example, which it would be really good to do some work on. I mean, in areas like Wetherby Ward, where the council has very little land and therefore opportunities, it would be really good to see some work being done on the river, which is such an important element of, for the ward in terms of B&G.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Downs.
So it's quite an important subject to me. I think the other thing is you were saying about the potential for developers to use their units elsewhere in the country, and I think it would be good if it's possible for Leeds to sort of say, we've got all of this land, and if you are developing in Leeds, we really would appreciate it, because for communities like mine, they don't want to see development. However, if they are getting development, the worst thing is to say you're getting development, you're losing sort of green space, and it's being put in Plymouth. You know, if you said, well, actually, we've got the capacity within Otley to use those units, we want them used in Otley. I mean, I understand that there's a wider Leeds awareness issue here, but even in places like Otley, if you were to put them in somewhere like I don't know, the other in Killingbeck or something, there would still be some resistance from residents because there is a certain NIMBYism there. But we do have the capacity for them, and we really would like, if there's any way of retaining them, to do so.
I just come in. So I think ultimately most developers understand that they have a job to do to win over the community. So I think our role is to make sure that we are easy to access, and that they have that faith in terms of what we're going to do, and that our pricing puts us in a position where actually that's not the reason that they don't want to come to us. Because I think ultimately, if you were a developer, why wouldn't you choose to do it locally? So I think ultimately that is where people will go. We just need to make sure that we've got everything in place and that we're effective. And obviously if you're on plans panels and things, you can point people towards it. The planning department will flag it as one option. I think they have to be neutral in terms of what they flag, but it will be put forward as an option. And like Vicky said, there's not a lot else at the moment in Leeds or in Yorkshire, so actually you would hope that will be the go-to. So hopefully it will work itself out naturally, but
that's the exact point I was making.
Thank you, and I think that it is a really, really important point. And I'm trying to remember, people who are on plans panels might remember, have we had plans panel training on BNG?
Yes.
We have, okay.
Yes.
Okay, and I mean it might be worth to keep that as a kind of an annual refresher in terms of training, because certainly people who are on plans panel understanding first of all the hierarchy, but also what Leeds has got to offer, and I know we had something come to city plans a while ago, and they were planning on putting buying units in Bolton or something, and I think that's the kind of thing we ought to be aware of as plans panel members, of what we've got to offer in Leeds. Okay, thank you. Any more? Yeah, Councillor Stable.
Just that Vicky mentioned about the work that the flood risk team are doing in terms of the water courses work in terms of biodiversity net gain. Is that a team that we could invite to this meeting to come and do an update on that when it's appropriate?
The flood risk team, yes. Yeah, they have been, and I think they're on, or they've certainly been every year since I've been chairing. So we can just ask them to include that when they come. Thank you. Any more questions on that section? Okay, so just to say thank you, really appreciated that, and also to pass on thanks for when you've been working, certainly in our ward. I think the communication has been really good, particularly with the friends of groups, who that's a difficult thing to get right sometimes, and I think it's been done really well, so thank you very much. Okay, so are we over to Tony?
Sorry, just bear with me a second. I'll just bring up the presentation. Suffering from the same lag that Vicky was suffering from. So thank you, everybody. Good morning, everyone. So I think mine might be slightly higher level than what the detailed presentation that colleagues have just provided, but I want to look to do an update. I think, like I touched on previously, like colleagues in FRM, I've been here now for the last 2 years and done a brief update in some capacity on where we're at with the woodland creation scheme. So I want to continue that, and I can share some updates, and I can probably respond to some of the questions Councillor Carlisle around how we work collectively with asset management. I'll also, through the course of the presentation, then just offer up some practical examples about where we are working with our environmental charity partners, and also around some of the projects that we're doing, so members get a flavour of some of the things that are occurring on the ground and that are taking place now. So commencing with a quick update on woodland creation, always worthwhile, I feel, just go back to first principles around why we're looking to do this and why we're looking to implement the scheme. What's up on site there is something that just shows you what the benefits of tree planting are. They're well rehearsed, I don't need to go over those in depth, whether that be benefit in terms of the environment, benefit in terms of flood risk management, or habitat and biodiversity improvements, or if we go down to the personal level and we look at neighbourhoods and we look at property value and we look at just general offer of shade and visual amenity, we can always recognise there's benefits linked to trees. This is a busy dashboard and there's a lots of narrative that sit underneath it. And just see if I can just apologies for that, it's like on the back right hand corner being blocked out. What you can start to see from this narrative and dashboard that we've got is we've got a whole host of GIS data now that's been built up over the course of us starting this woodland creation programme. And you can see from that top line that there's some significant numbers that we can start and things that we can celebrate in terms of the achievements that we've made, whether that be 500,000 whips planted, what we've done around standard trees, how you can start to see how we've evolved into hedgerow planting, and now we're constantly looking at new sites. I've talked, I've come here previously and I've rehearsed that for every one site we look at, we've probably ruled out 3. There's quite an involved process for how we get there. You can see that we're now starting to accumulate significant volumes in terms of net whip planting that's been completed. That is not an insignificant sum. I think there is some merit in Councillor Carlisle's observations around challenges linked to that, and how we constantly using the green estate, and that there's limitations to that. I suppose one thing to touch on that and to reassure Chair and the committee, officers within the team work hand in glove and holistically with colleagues in asset management. We're looking at the agricultural portfolio the whole time. I'm conscious that colleagues in asset management have to balance between various different things that could be environmental in nature, whether that be a solar farm or requests from me to plant hectares of agricultural land with trees. There's a balance to how we use that and not wanting to fetter future asset management options, but to reassure the committee that we are working closely around that and we are looking at identifying other land. But we'll continue to bring sites forward. We'll continue to look at how we can also, I think, building on that gross hectareage there, where we can also look at introducing within our hectareage more environmental-led approaches. There's some examples that we can talk around that are taking place now around Thorpe Arch, for example, where grassland habitat is integral with tree planting. Environmental impact assessments are now a key part of what we're looking to do, just because of the proximity of our woodland creation schemes. That means we often trigger a requirement for an environmental impact assessment because we need to demonstrate that we're joined up and that those developments aren't existing in a vacuum. We also want to stress and emphasise that there's been a reason why we've pushed and promoted standard tree planting. It does provide a more immediate visual impact than what whip planting does. We've had significant success with that. To reassure and to reaffirm Polly's comments as well, we've thought through that to implement processes where we're putting the right tree in the right place. Some of those challenges that we've got with our urban tree portfolio and our urban forestry team as a whole is quite often because we have inappropriate trees in inappropriate places, and that then creates challenges for us. So a lot of our standard tree planting is focused in, very much driven by making sure it's the right tree in the right place with the right environment around it. On that basis as well, it's not just asset management that we're working with. We're also working at a strategic level with colleagues in highways. We've for a long time worked with them to develop those principles around Green Streets Initiative, how we can ensure that woodland creation and tree planting features heavily in terms of highway improvement schemes, whether that had been LP TIP recently or as Polly alluded to, E-Law, and we'll continue to do that in the future as well. So bottom line as well, I suppose, gives us that flavour of that recurring challenge that we have. We've got hectareage of whip sites that could be appropriate for whip planting that for whatever reasons we've not been able to deliver, whether that be a narrative around people not buying into that, but there's unmet capacity there for us. We've had schemes that have been cancelled as well. So it's just really, really important and imperative that we, and I ask this committee every year, is the support you can offer because you understand the agenda and you're engaged, and I know all the ward members across the city are as well, not just those that are present today, but we get an endorsement and buy-in for what we're looking to do because fundamentally the principles of it are very sound. So talking around achievements in 24-25 and some of those issues that we face, I think when I was here previously, we looked to tackle and update the board, the committee on where we were at with addressing some of those failures that we'd had in some of our early tree planting schemes. We've now completed a mass beta operation that's been ongoing for the last 12 months, certainly a key work stream last planting season. We had significant, we can point to significant success with that. It's been really, really beneficial. We have had challenges this year in terms of managing the impact of drought, and new planting sites that we planted in the 24-25 planting season, so whether that be earlier this year or towards the end of 2024. We have lost some of those due to drought. Again, just inevitable consequence of climate change, as Vicky alluded to, but for the most part, real success in terms of looking at what we've done around that mass beat up and going back over previous years and ensuring we've got good establishment levels. You asked an update on where we got to with mulch mat trials. There's probably a little bit busy this slide. We did put those in, and I did come to you previously. We touched there around, you can see an image for what we did and where the site went in. It was planted in that 23-24 planting season. It is in a rural location. That was the logic and rationale for us using planting tubes. It was incredibly successful. You can see from the image at the bottom of the screen that we've had good take up. That's going to be, we've got good establishment levels in here. It has been a success. What was unfortunate is that we did identify another site at the same time to do in an urban area, because if you recall the discussion we had last time, some of the feedback you offered was, would this work in an urban area, would the mulch mat be lost? Unfortunately, one of those cancelled schemes that I referred to on the previous slide was one that we proposed to do mulch matting on. So what we've then looked to do is, it's evident from the bottom bullet point, is we identified 3 in this year where we're going to look to build on this further. So again, I can come back in future years, I can highlight whether or not this has or hasn't been successful when we've used it in an urban location. So just the next sort of area of the presentation is going to look at and talk around an environmental update, our work and the work that we've done with environmental partners and charities. One that's frequently come up through this consultation is the work that we do with Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, and I know already we've highlighted to the board that they're pivotal to us in supporting with the management of 10 of our nature reserves. Significant work is also taking place at a very site-specific level, whether that be Meanwood Beck, whether that be the work they're doing around the catchment as well, work on Rothwell Country Park. They are a key partner, and they are something that we're working with often, and they cover a gap in terms of some of our resourcing challenges. As I move, I don't know why my computer wants to restart now, that's really unfortunate, isn't it? See if we can't ignore that. Thanks. I would also just add as well, Polly's touched on, members around the table are perfectly aware of the budget challenges that we face corporately. One of the things that's been incredibly beneficial for the service, and the things it's allowed us to do, is we have had some discretionary capital in the capital programme. It's in there this year, it was also there previously, and we're looking to bid for capital funding in the future. One scheme I'm going to share and provide an update on is the work that we've done at Farnley Fish Pond. This was work that we was able to do using some of that discretionary capital that was available to the service to spend in areas where we know we had need. As you can see from the bullet points, it's a local nature reserve. It's surrounded by broadleaf woodland. It is already a haven for wildlife, but that's a genuine photo. That's what the site looked like. We had a significant issue with litter and detritus in the pond. We had dead fish occurring daily. It'd become a bit of a haven for ASB, and we recognised that there was a job for us to do something, mainly around looking at sedimentation build-up, and that would allow us to improve water quality and get back some water depth, which had obviously been a major issue, but also then looking to tackle some of the fly tipping and litter build-up that had taken place in the fish pond. Some of the images there at the bottom of the screen, unfortunately, again, that black is just blocking out the excavator there. We did remove 3,500 tonnes of sediment from the pond. We've done an additional planting of 5,500 plants. We've created new beds on the sediment that had been removed, new habitats, and then we were able to do a series of recreational development improvements as well. And I think the fundamental point at the bottom is that by working with local ward members, we're also being able to build momentum on the back of what started out as a negative story around the state of Farnley Fish Pond, build into a positive story, and then build that into some community engagement through the establishment of a new friends group, which has been incredibly positive. That's the picture taken from the same place on the left hand side for what Farnley Fish Pond looked like yesterday, and you can see there with the other improvements that we've made on the right hand side, those recreational things such as path improvements, bin improvements, access improvements have all been delivered in-house by the authority, acting as an internal service provider for environmental projects, and you can see the positive benefits that we've been able to have on site. So then I'm going to now touch around some of the schemes that we've worked specifically with the Yorkshire Wildlife Fund on, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Golden Acre Park. What you see on screen is not just a big puddle. That's a purposely built Great Christian New Pond. We've delivered this project in partnership with Yorkshire Wildlife Fund, as I've said already. It's principally about looking, I appreciate this at a very, very local level, but it's building on the more strategic conversations that we've had already about the importance of connectivity. The reason why that pond's there is because it's identified, we've got mapped with colleagues across West Yorkshire where we know we have new habitat. There's funding that's available to create connected habitats. This is a new habitat that's looking to be developed that will will hopefully lead to Great Christian New transition from one site to the next. Significantly aid conservation and the habitat development. And from a site-based perspective, that site will naturalise, is already naturalising. What we want it to be a naturalised habitat. We don't want that to be man-made. We want it to essentially, by creating the new pond, which you can see is holding water and it's still holding water, the area around it will naturalise the area that we've disturbed, and as a consequence of that, we're going to have a really good habitat for Great Crested Ewes. Please be reassured that American Skunk Cabbage is not an alternative punk band. It is genuinely, they're not live on the John Peel stage. It's a genuine issue. We had an issue at, I've got to make you giggle, Councillor Tudor, success of the week. We had a significant issue with that being planted at Golden Acre Park. It was done at the time with good intentions as being an ornamental plant. But it is an invasive plant. It is starting to affect Brewery Marsh Nature Reserve. It does significantly produce seeds, as you can see from the bullet points on screen. They are travelling down the catchment and creating an issue in Brewery Marsh, which I believe is a triple SI site. Give a confirmation if I'm right. Thank you. The money and the partnership working that we've been able to do with Yorkshire Wildlife Trust has meant we can work with others. You can see there from the other teams we work with, whether that be Yorkshire Wildlife Volunteers, our own Rangers team, the Adult Dam volunteer group. There's lots of teams that have come together to allow us to start to tackle that in Golden Acre Park. As a consequence, we've then been able to roll that out and see consequential improvements in other areas. So again, a small-scale project, but a really, really important one in terms of biodiversity and habitat. And unfortunately, the three of us didn't join up because there's a picture of harvest mice. Hopefully that's not what's in your garden, Councillor Downs, or on your property. But it is a massive success story. It has made a huge difference. We'll be looking to do practical things. So it does the areas of conservation for the harvest mice sit will be cut less frequently. A third of it won't be cut. We'll rotate the area that's not cut. We'll do all we can to continue to conserve that area of habitat. The reason why I've shown dead hedging there, that's an environmental improvement. It's an example of an environmental type project that volunteers can get involved in and that our rangers team can support. If I was to show you areas behind that dead hedging, there's a football area and a kickball area that's there that was completely mudded. All the ground cover was completely destroyed, and by just introducing that very, very basic environmental improvement and dead hedge, we've been able to see that growth in fauna on the back of it. So there again, some real practical examples of where we've been able to make small steps on site, work with volunteers, work with College of Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, but deliver some real benefit in terms of the environment and biodiversity. And the boring photo on the right hand side is just about white claw crayfish protection, but that fencing work has made significant benefits in terms of allowing us to protect habitat that sits beyond there. So again, practical things that are all taking place at a single site. Things like the Great Crested News Project, there's scope for us to roll that out across the city in other areas within reason. Obviously, we need to be mindful of development. And then also, there's scope for us to do these types of projects in other places, working with partners. So we're already doing it, for example, in Temple Newsome. So there's lots of opportunities for it to roll these kind of initiatives out. But what I wanted to do today is to give you a flavour of some of the things that we're doing. I sort of picked on Golden Acre as a specific example. We've touched already. Emma talked in her presentation about how we committed through Executive Board in 2021 to 50% reduction in seasonal bedding across the city. We built on that, and that then evolved over previous years into significant reduction also in terms of city centre bedding. What you can see up on screen, members coming into Civic Hall all the time, is an anti-clockwise view of all the beds that are based around Civic Hall. That was our own little micro example of soil deterioration. It needed a period of rest. We did significant work in terms of soil enhancement. And what we're looking to do now and proposing to do is something different that moves us away from bedding plants. There will be still some ornamentals going in there, but you can see what's proposed up on screen is a mix of edible planting that takes due regard to shade, ornamental planting, as well as looking at wildflower development in and around Civic Hall as well. So we want to try to demonstrate in a high profile area of the city that there's different things that we can do, and there's different ways in which you can present civic spaces. My fear is always when doing a presentation to members that I get picked up on Latin plant names, which is definitely not my specialism. I can share what some of those plants will be going in around there subsequent to this, but I can reassure you I won't be taking questions on any Latin plant names that are intended. But what we want to see in there is things like chives, mixtures of herbs, something that provides a sense of smell as well. So there's lavenders going in there. So there's lots of things that are proposed in there that will, I think, provide a significant look and feel that's different to what we've always had around the Civic Hall beds previously. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Absolutely fascinating. Who's going to start off with any questions? We'll start with Councillor Stables.
Thank you for your presentation. That was really interesting. So I've got a couple of questions. The first was about the whip planting. Yep. So what percentage of whips planted have survived, and how can we improve that? It's my first question. And my second question is around the mulch mats trial, which I'm really interested in. So you mentioned that in the trial that you've done so far, which is in a rural location, that it was very successful. So given that, are we planning to roll that out? When are we rolling it out? And when are we going to stop using glyphosate in those rural locations?
So the trial has been successful. I would come back to my observations about wanting to look at urban areas as well, and seeing how it rolls out in those areas, and if it can be equally successful. I'm certainly not anti as looking at it doing this at scale. There's probably a need for us to do a little bit more cost analysis just to work through what the cost details would be. And I think it's just important that we continue to learn and grow. What was evident from the image that I shared on screen is in that specific location we did have to use tubes because we knew we'd have had an issue with deer and rabbit. So everything in terms of our efficiency of process is constantly being looked at. Whether that be picking on tubes, for example, we make sure that we buy tubes if we do have to use them can be reused. So we are looking to be efficient. I think my commitment should be, Councillor Stables, to come back to this group with further updates once we've had that urban trial, and then looking at where we then do it in more rural areas and roll it out after that. I think there certainly will be options for us to do that. In terms of whip planting, as I touched on, we sort of acknowledged that we did have an issue with establishment rates prior to 24-25 planting season, hence the reason why we had that significantly enhanced speed up programme. The stats that I can share with you from last year is that we had about 40% failure rate, and primarily due to drought on sites that we planted last year. So I think we just need to take some learning from that, probably look at timings of planting, but again, it's one of those areas where we recognise we're going to have to permanently evolve and review what we're looking to do.
Thank you. Do you want to come back on that?
So in terms of you mentioned about the tubes, and I've been meaning to ask about this for a while. Are the tree planting tubes biodegradable? And if not, can we make them biodegradable? Because the reason I say that is I've been involved in crawling under hedgerows and removing the plastic ones that over time disintegrate and create microplastics that are getting into the environment, which we're really concerned about. And there are thousands used along the A168 between Boston Spa and Wetherby, which we've been taking them out over the last few years. As the trees have established, they've been left and they just break up into tiny little fragments of plastic, which is really concerning. So I'd really like to know what we're doing.
Yeah, sure. So I think I've got some notes on this. It almost like I thought you may have asked me the question. I think one of the issues with biodegradable tubes, to be frank, is that often they lead to being incinerated. So I think we recognise that one of the challenges is exactly what you just alluded to, which has been the ongoing maintenance of tube planted sites, which is why I sort of stress and emphasise what we're constantly looking to do is how we can reuse. I think what we need to, obviously what we want that tube to do is to be able to function for 5 to 8 years, so it needs to be relatively durable, and we know that we can actually get the tree that we planted as a whip through to establishment. What's then incumbent on us, bearing in mind we're only at year 5 and we've tried to minimise the use of tubes as much as we possibly can, is to make sure that we corporately, in terms of our tree planting programme, don't mitigate that issue, and we make sure that we come back on site and that we try and find a way to reuse any plastic tubing that we have used. That narrative I set out previously about constantly looking to review, biodegradable tubes aren't more efficient in terms of durability, in terms of cost, and as I said right now, they're quite difficult to recycle after use, which is why they often lead to incineration. So I think what's important for us is that we make sure through our programme that we get as robust plastic tubes as possible and use them again. But then I would also reiterate, we look to take other steps such as stock-proof fencing, because primarily a part of the tube's function is to protect the plantation from rabbit or deer eating it. So there's other ways we can do that, mainly through fencing, but we look to minimise the use of tubes as much as we possibly can.
Sorry, just coming back on the biodegradable. If they're biodegradable, they should biodegrade. So can't they just be composted?
I'm not. Possibly. But I'm not. Polly?
I know from when I first started in some of the sites I'd gone where they'd been biodegradable, they don't seem to biodegrade very effectively. So it's a bit similar to some of the packaging you get that's classed as biodegradable. People put it in their compost and it doesn't biodegrade. I think it's similar with the tubes, that they're called biodegradable. They're not plastic, but they're not necessarily biodegrading quickly enough and effectively enough, so we still end up with the issue. Vicky's nodding, so hopefully there's an agreement there.
Yeah, there was a study done with Saeem was doing it last year, and they compared loads of different biodegradable products in the market, and there wasn't one that was really that good, and they all had disadvantages to them, like what Tony said. So yeah, it's not as good as it sounds, is the answer, unfortunately.
Thank you. Councillor Carlisle's next.
Thank you for those updates on that. We'll come back to more on the mulch matting at some point in the future then when you come back with that. It's a shame that we didn't have that urban site. I would have quite liked mine to be included as one, so had we known it had failed I would have put forward the ones where residents had complained, but that's fine. And it's a shame that you've had drought this year because we lost a lot of trees in some areas to the amount of water we had previous years. So it's a shame that unfortunately, as nature shows, and as many in our area would say, why can't you have learnt from previous year? But you learnt how to deal with a lot of flooded sites, and now unfortunately you've had to deal with the absolute opposite. So that shows just it's impossible to do. Very simple question was, one of the things I used to really enjoy when coming in the Civic Hall was the competition where kids had designed some of the beds around, and I'm not a fan of planting that you put in for a very short period, then somebody has to come back, dig up, and then you come back and put some more plants in that last another 2 months, and then somebody comes back again. I don't think that's a very good success anyway. But have you been able to think of any ways which, with the new planting regime, which I think is a really good idea, of how we could enable something like that competition, which was school kids designing a bed? It would be fantastic for them to design an edible bed, or one that is made out of wildflowers in some way, albeit that's much more difficult to tame than load of bedding plants. But I would rather we don't go back to a load of bedding plants, because I don't find them much of an enlightening experience myself.
So I was involved in some of those competition beds at the time. I think the first key principles for us around Civic Hall have been looking at some alternative options that move us away from bedding. I'm obviously would defer to Councillor Feek and Polly, but I wouldn't be object to us looking at doing some competition beds and identifying one or two of them that could be flexible and changeable. That would seem like a reasonable thing to do. We'd have a conversation with colleagues about how we'd enable that, but I'm kind of hoping I don't get kicked from the left or right, so we're doing okay.
Thank you. Councillor Tudor, I think, is next.
Amazing presentations. Thank you, everybody. I forgot to say that. Councillors often say that too lengthy, but thank you. What is a beat-up programme? Hopefully it isn't what it sounds like. And secondly, on your slide it said additional hectarage for whip planting unused was 44 hectares. Is that the total that you think is left, or is that like your annual thing that you know the annual figures of annual figures? Because I mean, certainly in our ward, the idea of 50, well, not the ward but the city, of the 50 hectares a year for 25 years, the Woodland and Creation are coming to us about tiny pockets of land now. So I think we might be nearly, whipped out. So yeah, that was a question about the 44. Thanks.
Do you want to press your mic, please? Thank you.
Apologies. A beat up is a woodland planting phrase, and it just literally means you go back onto site after you've done the initial plant. You may have to remove some grass, ultimately trying to stop the grass outgrowing the whip, and then the whip then failing. So the beat up exercise refers to that. So you're looking for a way in which you can control the grass and then you're beating up in terms of numbers. So you'll then replant. So you'll have a fixed number of trees per hectare that you're looking to plant. You'll go through the site, you'll identify ones that have failed, and then you'll top those numbers back up. So it's a topping up exercise, but the phraseology is beating up. I think what I'll do, Councillor Tudor, is I'll interrogate the 44 hectares for you further. I think all I would say in terms of narrative, I do think, and obviously as the Office of Responsibility for Operations right across the city and our green spaces, there is scope in quite a lot of our spaces for us to do more in terms of planting. And I think it's really incumbent on me to encourage my operational officers to continue to look for where there are areas where we can do more and think about what that maintenance regime looks like. There are some parts of the city where people do have a fixed view and an expectation on closely mown grass, and I think that there's things that we can do that we've touched around already around promoting benefit and why that would be the wrong thing for us to do, or for us to think about alternative ways of delivering a good quality green space that reflects the climate emergency. Quite often we'll identify a site, and when you start to interrogate it further, you find because you work in an urban area, it's covered in services, you've got relatively shallow fibre optics, there's limitations around some of those sites. And I talked around the fact that for often we look at 3 sites and only end up planting 1. We have had sites where we look where we brought them forward, there's no viable reason that would prevent us planting a site, but we understand that through consultation and through local engagement it's not been the right thing to do. And we've talked at length with members about understanding local concerns, and we try to do as in-depth a consultation as possible and manage those issues. But inevitably it's not always the case that we can bring a planting site forward, and we understand that, and we recognise that as we move forward, promoting the impact of climate is incumbent on us to do. We may be able to turn the tide on that, and then maybe people then see benefit of tree planting in their locality. I think as well, speaking on behalf of the team that do this and that work incredibly hard for us on this topic, I think a marginal gains approach is probably where we are corporately, and I appreciate there may be times where we bring forward a site and you may look at it and it may be a couple 100 metres squared and the view might be, why are we doing that? We're doing that because if we get enough of that, we get a critical mass and a cumulative mass, and then we can hit that 50 hectares target. We aren't, it's a strange thing for an officer in Leeds to say, but we aren't in North Yorkshire. When I go to White Rose Forest meetings and I see the significant hectares they can bring forward, is because they're sat on vast amounts of land. Our challenge is to work in an urban environment, so we are going to have to continue to look at those smaller sites, but be reassured, as I said already, we are working with colleagues in asset management to see if we can access other parts of the portfolio and bring forward larger sites, and also make sure that if we're doing something strategic, whether that be levelling up or other issues, that we look to marry tree planting into that. So we will continue to work on that.
Thank you. Can I bring Polly in?
One thing which we haven't talked about today, and we've started discussions about, is the 50 hectare target. And one of the things when we're looking at the tree plant is quite often we get the conflict between the sort of biodiversity net gain and what's actually better for an area. So we are looking at whether we actually change that target to be a bit more all-encompassing. So it's about 50 hectares of improvement, but that improvement could be achieved in different ways. And we think that probably sits better in terms of the work that we're doing, and there are still sort of carbon benefits and all the other nature benefits and public benefits for the biodiversity net gain work that Vicky's explained, and the tree planting. I think being too limited and focused on tree planting starts to cause conflict in some of our green spaces that's unhelpful, whereas the biodiversity net gain might actually be better received. So that is something that we're looking at and exploring. So it's probably worth just saying that for context.
Thank you. Councillor Rafiq?
I just need to shoot off in a bit, but I think when you set the bars, very high, which we did, to plant 5 million trees over 25 years, 50 hectares a year, you do become, a victim of your own kind of success. I think we've done well, but And Tony's right. I think there's more could be done within the bigger sites, woodlands, parks, but we're finding increasingly difficult, you know, in terms of smaller community, you know, green spaces where we've actually met with resistance from local residents as well, and then in some cases elected members. So we need that kind of, I suppose, from elected members and residents to put forward more sites. But I think in the grand scheme of things, you know, we've actually planted more trees within the White Rose Forest, which includes the combined authority area and parts of North Yorkshire as well, including York, far more than other local authorities, and our targets, you know, for between, is it 2050 and now in 2050, Tony, which was in the White Rose Forest Annual Report. The strategy which was reviewed earlier this year is again, you know, is higher than the other authorities within the area, within the combined authority area as well. So again, we want to be ambitious. We want to kind of set the bars high, but there are challenges which remain in terms of finding suitable sites.
Thank you, Councillor Rafiq. Thank you for attending today. So our final presentation of the morning is over to Polly.
Okay, just share my screen as well. Everything is working slower today. I don't know if it's just me. Now we've just gone through the whole presentation. Right, there we go. So Councillor Dye gave a really good introduction to this from what we talked about earlier about the Lotherton and the visit we did there and the importance of conservation in a zoo environment. So we're just going to do a bit of a deeper dive in terms of what Tropical World does. And I'll try and move through it quite quickly because I'm just conscious of time as well. So as most of you will know, Tropical World is infamous for its butterflies, and so it made absolute sense for the conservation project that the team focus on to be focused around butterflies primarily. And so what we've looked at doing is actually improving the kind of Roundhay Park, the surrounding area, by establishing wildflower meadows to kind of try and promote the local environment for butterflies, as well as helping to educate and raise awareness of butterflies in that environment. And obviously Roundhay Park is really well visited, so actually anything you do there does get a lot of exposure and visibility, so it's really important in terms of our public education programme. We were really lucky because the Butterfly Conservation Trust wanted to work with us, so we've been able to benefit from their expertise and look at how we work more effectively. So I think when we came last year, we already talked about the wildflower meadows that we'd established, but what we've done is we've grown on those, and we talked there about the two meadows at Lakeside Meadow and Castle Meadow, and you can see the level of growth, so 900 metres squares of one, 1,100 metres squared of the other. And we work with Butterfly Conservation and Natural England to make sure that the species that we're putting in are representative of what you would have seen in that area. So that's really important, that you're just not using any old wildflower seed, that it is relevant for those areas. The Green Spaces team continue to maintain it, and that basically, it says there in detail, rotivating, harrowing and reseeding, to make sure they're effective, and they look really good. If anyone's had the chance to go and visit and look at them, they look good. They're a good feature for the park. So we then monitor. So obviously, like Vicky's already said during her BNG talk, it's not just about doing the work, it's actually about seeing what impact it has. So we collect data from April to October each year, and we do a transect walk, so there's a set route so that we can see a comparison. We submit that, so we're part of the national programme. It's not just something that we're doing in isolation, which is really important, and we'll continue doing that year on year. And all of this supports our zoo licence, so conservation is an absolute fundamental part of a zoo licence, which again Emma mentioned when she talked about our overall strategy and having the Biaza zoo registration. So if we just look at the actual data, so we've done it for 3 years, and this year's been fantastic. So we've got 13 species and 73 butterfly sightings, and for the first time we've seen species like the purple hair streak and the white letter hair streak. I will totally admit I'm reading that off the slide. That have come to the park. But it's great that we're starting to see that increase in what's happening, and it's a massive jump up. Some of it will be weather. We've obviously had a really warm climate this year, but we're obviously supporting the improvements and increases through the habitat we're providing. So, as well as the actual improvements we make to biodiversity, what's really important is how we then use it. So we've mentioned before about how we're training people in terms of maintaining spaces. So we've used the wildflower meadows to train our own apprentices in caring for the meadows. We have zoo education staff who do workshops for local schools, and they've been able to use the work for that we've done with the wildflower meadows in their programme of workshops. We've also, every year, we run a big butterfly count, which the Butterfly Conservation Trust are running. We support it at Tropical World, and you'll see the staff there dressed up as butterflies. The cakes that are sold are butterfly themed. Everything is butterfly themed, and there's a lot of marketing and comms that go around that, and that all just ties us back to our public education. And then what we've started to do is build on that. So it's really important for us, I think. So although we're a zoo and we host species from other countries and other parts of the world, we've really focused a lot of our conservation on what we can do locally and the impact we can have. So we talked earlier about the river fly monitoring. So staff at Tropical World, the animal keepers, have been trained to be surveyors, and they've worked in 3 different parts of the city doing that monitoring. So that's at Meanwood Beck, Carlton Beck and White Beck. And so far those results have been positive. There's no issues with water quality. But again, it acts as an alert system, and for our staff to be involved in that and understand what's going on locally also helps them when they're engaging with people that come and visit the zoo. And we've also spread into bumblebees, so why stop at butterflies and water? So we're doing a very similar thing in the sense that the transect walks and doing that monitoring, but we're in our first year of that. So the data there, we obviously haven't got a comparison, we just know what we've seen this year. But as we go forward, we'll be able to see how that progresses. So again, it really helps us to start to understand what's happening in Brownday Park as well, and to see how wildlife is faring. So going beyond what we do locally within the park, we also look at breeding programmes. And so there's something called the EEP, which is the European Endangered Species Breeding Programme. And so anyone who's not involved in the zoo world probably won't understand quite how tightly controlled everything is. So in terms of genetic bloodlines and who can breed with who is all very tightly controlled to make sure that anything that is then put back in the wild has the best chance of succeeding. And so that's something that we support. We've been very successful with elongated tortoises, which are critically endangered in terms of breeding. And so we want to be part of that programme. We also have 2 species that are part of EEP programmes, the emperor tamarins and the pygmy marmosets, and we keep single-sex species. So what we do is when another zoo has a call for a specific a male or whatever it is, we make sure that they've been looked after well kept, and then that animal will move on. So actually our pygmy marmoset, one of the males has just moved on to Drayton Manor Zoo to take part in a breeding programme. And so we are really heavily involved in that, making sure that we give all these species that are endangered the best possible chance of survival. Beyond that, we also do donations to conservation, so we collect donations, so things like Ollie the octopus, which is infamous and been on our social media recently, things like that get fed back into our local conservation projects. But we also make donations to 2 international projects, so one linked to the elongated tortoise in Angkor in Cambodia, and there we're supporting for tortoise food and travel costs for keepers. and then the Cotton Top Tamarind Project in Colombia, and there we're helping support an awareness programme to explain actually why we shouldn't be keeping them with pets and trying to keep the animals actually within the country. So all of that work just plays into our conservation impact and the impact we can have as a zoo. And then just lastly, we also have sustainable products that we sell. I think the drink that's featured supports Biaza Rainforest Conservation Initiative, and we put publicity and interpretation up to explain sort of the importance of ethical purchasing and the impact it can have to different places across the world. And then I suppose just to finish on actually what we're doing, so we're continuing to develop the meadows within the park. We're looking to put in bug hotels and butterfly shelters as well, continuing with our raising awareness. And then just in terms of further, so we, you know, our number of species we're looking at has expanded, but want to look at pond development, amphibian surveys, hedgehog homes, so all the sort of native species that we know are at risk. And looking at potential for sort of further native species to help at reintroduction, and looking at where we do sort of sustainable products as well, and that promotion. So, and we continue to work across sort of other zoos. We've got a good network under that Biaza, so we're always looking at what other places are doing and how we can improve and what more we can do to add. So that was a whistle-stop tour. I'm sure it would have been better delivered by the person who manages the site, but I've done my best to try and get a view. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Polly. I thought it was very well delivered, and apologies that we were kind of running out of time. Anybody got any questions on Polly's presentation? A comment is okay?
Yeah, no, it's just to say that really interested in all the work that's going on. I think it's fantastic, particularly the stuff around butterflies, native species, wildflower meadows and things. And just to say that it's interesting that you mentioned about the butterfly transect walk, because I've just been involved in setting one up in Boston Spa for the Community Green Group that's starting next year. So we're going to be doing a butterfly transect walk in Boston Spa, and it's just for others to know that that's something they can get involved in with local groups as well across the city. And I think it's it's a citizen science project, and it helps us because there's a massive decline in butterflies. It'll help us to try and grow the butterfly species across a wider area.
Thank you, that's fascinating. I think we will definitely take you up on that in Seacroft. I'm sure we could get a group together to do that. I think that'd be brilliant. Yep.
It's sort of a general question. Regards butterflies, etc. And I remember in my old house we used to have a buddleia tree, and I remember on one occasion counting over 50 butterflies, and I just don't see the numbers anymore, sadly. The tree died, and with it, you know, we'll talk about wildflower meadows, and I know the bee population is struggling as well. Is there anything that we can do as a council to try and promote further more home pollinators? Something that we're trying to do in our house, but I'm not sure whether I'm doing enough and whether there's more I can do. I mean, I own a bit of land which goes down to the A660, but it's a bank, and I don't know whether there's absolutely, it's just sort of weeds or whatever, and I just wonder if anything like that is worth putting anything in, and what we can do to try and help the public.
So we do some of that at the area in terms of our own sort of growing programme, so sort of highlighting the sort of plants and species that help, and I think also through things like the Butterfly Weekend, there will be people there that will talk about what you can do. But I think it's a valid point in terms of our sort of comms and engagement, actually doing that promotion and tying it in and using, because at the moment a lot of that would come out via the Tropical World channel, but actually we need to maybe look to push that out via the LCC channels or via the climate channel as well to promote that. And I think Leeds by Example as well does have at the moment a biodiversity page and about what you can do. So it would be another area we can look to focus. But maybe we should have a think about biodiversity comms specifically as an area.
With things like, I think with butterflies and bees, it's something that we can all do something about. You know, I think the focus with residents has been perhaps not on that, but as a wider area. It's all very well doing it at Butterfly World, but it needs to be a bigger, joined up approach. Thank you.
Thank you, and that fits really nicely with some of the things that we talked about at the workshop about, you know, quick wins that people can do, and things that we need to promote. Brilliant, thank you. Any more comments, questions? Okay, well, I think we've had a really good discussion. Thank you so much for everybody for coming along and sharing the work that you're doing. It's clearly an awful lot and it's really important, and I think it's something we should be really proud of as a city. So just to sum up, maybe I can't sum up where we got with actions, because we did come up with quite a few, but from Emma's presentation, one of the things we're going to look at is how we can link local planning to wildlife corridors, that we as ward members can look to promote activities, for example, volunteering. Emma, you were going to pass on contacts to Councillor Tudor to fit in with the Whitebeck Water Watchers project. We can also look at using community committees to support funding. And then from Vicky's, two key ones that I took away were that we should look to get an annual update on BNG to plans panel members, particularly as a refresher and for new members, so that we're all aware of that. And that when FRM come back, we can get them to update us on watercourse BNG. And then from Tony, thank you for agreeing to come back and do as an update on the mulch matting. You asked for us to support as a committee planting initiatives, and I think we can all agree that we would be happy to do that. We also looked at the idea of children's competition beds, so we can look into that. And then from Polly's, thank you to Councillor Stables for bringing up the local groups getting involved with butterfly transit walks. I think that'd be great to see that across the city. And to use the comms and engagement workshop that we're involved in to look at biodiversity as part of that and promoting home planting of pollinator-friendly plants. Anything I've missed that people think we should be taking away? Okay, thank you very much. Then that brings us to date and time of the next meeting, which is the 11th of November at 2 o'clock. So thank you everybody for attending. Thank you people for presenting, and we are done.